Welcome everybody to tonight's school committee meeting. Daryl, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We have a consent agenda, the minutes from October 15th, 2015, and oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda. That's read.
Thank you. Motion was made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Good, all right. Hey, guys, let's keep up, okay? We're going to go to interested citizens. If we have any interested citizens that would like to speak on a topic, we can just ask you to come to the podium and state your name and street. All right. Seeing none, we're going to go to recognition, but before we do the first ones that are on the list, we have Brendan Jones with us, who had asked permission to do a project on our behalf for his Boy Scout troop, and he's got an update for us, and we're just going to have him come up to the podium and give us a quick rundown of where he's at.
Hi, my name is Brendan Jones from 9 Brook Lane. I am here to get the final sign-off for my Eagle Scout project, even though I've already gotten I just wanted to have a very short little update about my Eagle Scout project. I completed my Eagle Scout project. It was completely funded by the Cooper Foundation. I had in total 22 volunteers working from 10 in the morning, well, not like for the whole time, but ranging from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we were under budget by just $8.
That's good.
And I have a picture.
Excellent. Remind us again verbally, what was the project?
I built 2 footbridges that crossed over streams
Excellent.
That's nice.
nearing my house.
All right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the update I got was they're done and actively being used?
Yes, they are being
Awesome.
actively enjoyed.
Good time of year to have those ready to go. Wow. That's a motley crew. I know some of those guys. Awesome. All right, Brendan, you got the signature, you're all set?
Yep.
All right, thank you very much, we really appreciate it.
Appreciate your help. Thank
Anytime
you.
the Boy Scouts want to come, and it's always been a very positive benefit to the community, so we'd like to see more and more of it, and you're a good representative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Superintendent Clenchey, what else do we have for recognition tonight?
Well, I'd like to welcome Kelly Davis. Kelly Davis is pitch hitting for Olivia this evening. So you're going to have to deal with 2 Kellys at the table tonight. So,
But
I
only
don't know
one
if you can contend with that. But Kelly obviously didn't have time to prepare a report for this evening. So I'll just mention a few things while I'm talking, then we'll go on to Littleton High School, if you don't mind. This fall has been very active in a lot of great ways. Our fall sports teams that have been doing well. Season's coming to a close pretty soon. We have a couple of football games left, and before you know it, we're going to be into winter sports. So I'd like to commend all the players and coaches for a great season. The LHS play is actually beginning this evening, and I wish them the best for their first performance. And the play is titled The Mad Woman of Schcmte, French pronunciation. And it looks like a great event. So if you have an opportunity this weekend, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, to take part in going to watch the play, I'd highly recommend it. And the other day, on Tuesday, the Littleton Middle School sponsored a Veterans Day assembly. We had a nice luncheon for local veterans and a great assembly with slideshows and music and speeches, and a lot of work went into that. Greatly appreciated by the veterans of our community, and as your superintendent, I thought it was very well done. So thank you very much. We also had an NHS induction this week as well, and a lot of new members to the National Honor Society at the high school. It was very well done as well, and thank you to the teachers that were involved, and congratulations to all the students that are part of our National Honor Society. This time I'll turn it over to Principal Harrington to bring some commendations forward for a number of students that won a scholarship.
Good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Clenchey. Happy to be here again to announce the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship recipients. Littleton High School has 35 seniors who have qualified to receive the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. This scholarship entitles recipients to free tuition upon their acceptance to a Massachusetts State University or college. And the following students have qualified for this scholarship based upon their performance on the English Language Arts and Mathematics MCAS tests taken during their sophomore year. It's a long list, so I'll try to go through it quickly. Hannah Longi, Cole Armstrong, Emily Barkovic, Melanie Bertolino, Caitlin Bertozzi, Henry Bouchard, Victoria Bork, Katie Bradford, Ryan Cahill, Aaron Dory, Brendan Foreman, Laura Heavenor, Zen Holmes, Carrie Hubbard, Emily Imbrogna, Sylvia Jackson, Alana Johnston, Allison Christophic, Caitlin Leonard, Amanda Luddig, Samantha Maylott, Connor McCarthy, Noah Majarian, Daniel Millard, Ryan Morse, Brian O'Neill, Lori Sill, Hannah Tosi, Jason Trainer, Jonathan Trott, Matthew Vaca, Ryan Vallon, Christian Watson, Michael Webster, and Samantha Yates. So we congratulate them. Again, to be eligible for the Adams Scholarship, students must score advanced on one MCAS test and advanced or proficient on the second MCAS test. They also must have a combined score that places them in the top 25% of the graduating class. So we congratulate all of our students who have earned this distinction and potentially may have certainly made themselves eligible for a scholarship, but may take the University of Massachusetts system up on the scholarship. Within the next year, they'll go in a number of different directions, and the Adams Scholarship presents an option for them as they consider where they will attend college. So congratulations to our students.
Can I just ask a quick question? So how many names roughly did you read off? About 25, right?
35.
So
35.
we made the 25% level, right? It's conceivable that there are other kids that actually probably may even met the criteria, but just didn't make the cutoff, which is actually good. That's a
Right.
good sign, right?
Oh, yeah, because they might have made it at another school.
Right. No, that's awesome.
So 35 out of 111
Yeah.
graduates, about 32%.
Yeah, great.
Excellent.
So it's not 25% of Littleton High School, it's 25% of the state, and so we...
25% of the graduating class. Places them in the top 25%. Yeah.
Could be ties.
Yeah, exactly.
Top 25 and ties. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much.
All right. All set for recognition?
You bet.
All right. We're going to jump right into presentations. We have a good one tonight. The Northwestern Evaluation Association Measures of Academic Promise MAP Assessments. And Dr. Jamian is going to give us that, correct?
Yes, I'll just come up to the front, Dr. Jamie, and I'll just say a few words while you're walking up here. The Northwestern Educational Assessment is something that we brought into our district a little over a year ago. As I mentioned in previous meetings, I've used this assessment in a number of districts. And what's intriguing about this assessment is it gives you real-time information that you can use with students to develop individual profiles, as a result, individual learning programs. And it's, in my opinion, incredible what it does in terms of giving our staff an opportunity to reflect on practice and assessment strategies throughout the year. We've already noticed some positive differences in our schools in terms of student progress when they've been writing MCAS, for example, and beyond that with the thousands of assessments that we give every year within our district. Locally developed assessments, formative assessments, we certainly noticed some improvement. So quite exciting, and they're computerized tests, they're adaptive tests, which mean that the tests actually adapt to the strengths of the learner. So every child has a test that hones in on their particular skill levels. And I'm not going to tell the whole story because I'll steal the thunder from Dr. Jamie, so I'm going to stop there. I could feel it as I was talking.
There's a lot of thunder with these MAP tests. It's utilized throughout the country and the world, and we're very pleased to be entering year 2 of our implementation. The school committee, parents, faculty, each of the constituent groups that we deal with have heard different things about the MAP test. And today, this presentation is our chance to provide at least a baseline of shared information regarding some major themes. Now, this presentation, like the implementation starting last year, is very much a collaborative effort between faculty and administration. I'll be joined by Mr. Pete Dallaire, who is the K-5 Math and Science Instructional Support Specialist. Within days of joining Littleton Public Schools, he was involved in helping us on the administrative end set up a number of the structures in terms of timing and training for the first-year implementation of MAP. Now, I'll be joined by 4 classroom teachers today in this presentation. Mrs. Vanessa Holm, grade 2, Mrs. Rita Mckinley, Russell Street School, reading interventionist for grades 3 through 5, Mrs. Diane Tricana, ELA teacher in grade 6, and Mrs. Amy Manheimer, who is grade 8 mathematics. And Amy has had extensive experience starting in another district utilizing the MAP test. What I would suggest, if this is agreeable to the school committee, I would like Mr. Dallaire and we'll be presenting portions of the presentation. Then we're going to bring the faculty members up to share their perspectives from the classroom. Pete and I will finish the presentation, and then the teachers will come back up again, and you can ask any of us a number of questions. So again, there's a lot of initials. There's a lot of initials in education, and this online testing program added a whole bunch of initials for folks in Littleton to become aware of and familiar with. NWEA stands for Northwest Evaluation Association. MAP stands for Measures of Academic Progress, and those are the assessments. Or show me how to do it.
Push the button.
Oh, that's good enough. Okay, I can do that. So this is just some of the main topics, the general topics in the overview. We want to give you an overview of the MAP assessments, maybe you've had your children come home and talk about, we did MAP today. You'll hear that 3 times a year. What are the tests that are administered? What does the data look like? What are the resources for reports and data, and the instructional resources for faculty to utilize? What did we see in our first time around the bend with this MAP testing, and what are the next steps? Okay, the first set of initials, NWEA. NWEA is a not-for-profit educational services organization. It was established by educators about 40 years ago. NW in the Northwest, in Oregon. I love its mission. I think it's true to its mission, partnering to help all kids learn. And the partnering aspect comes from NWEA linking with schools and districts within the United States, or educational agencies within the United States and in 41 countries, to utilize their resources, whether it's professional development or the online testing program. And in their mission to help schools create a culture that uses data to make educational decisions, it very much reflects something that I've said since I got here in Littleton, that was here before me, a culture that utilizes data to make instructional decisions. This slide just gives you some basics about the MAP features of MAP assessments before we get into a more deeper dive in those features. Basically, they're K-12 interim assessments. They're web-based. They're computer adaptive. You've been hearing that phrase, computer adaptive, a lot. We'll go into what that means. The tests mostly, they consist of multiple choice questions, and they're grade level independent, and foremost, they are aligned to state learning standards. Key features of the MAP assessments and the reasons why, upon the superintendent's recommendation, we took a look at the MAP assessments. We had presentations about them. These were the key features that underlie the choice, the reasons for Littleton's deciding to implement. The MAP assessments do provide valid, reliable, longitudinal data based on an equal interval scale, and I'll be going over what that equal interval scale means. It does provide real-time, immediate data on how students master. You hear the phrase connected to the frameworks. What do students know and are able to do? Their achievement on standards-based content. And finally, in sports, you hear that, sweet spot. How do you zero in on exactly, an accurate picture outside of grade level bands of what students know and what they're able to do? It's identifying the instructional level for each student, and then that sets up and empowers the teacher or the interventionist to link their instruction and learning targets and interventions to that student's specific needs. And finally, because the tests are linked, each test question is linked to that equal interval scale on a set of standards, we're able to demonstrate academic growth over time. Now, this is what it's like for students taking the tests. The tests are web-based. They're taken on a computer within Littleton Public Schools. We've utilized computers, we've utilized Chromebooks, and we've utilized iPads. For the grade 2, they take what's called the MPG, the MAP for primary grades. The MAP for primary grades has audio instruction in order to provide support for non-readers when they're taking the test. There's also protocols defined for testing accommodations when it's appropriate. The tests are untimed, although it takes an average of 45 minutes, and students, as long as they're progressing, are given as much time as they need to complete the test. And Mr. Dallaire will be joining us now. I already introduced you.
Hi. Good evening. So, what we're going to show you next is just a few examples of what the students see when they take the tests. For example, this is a sample of the grade 2 MPG reading item, and on it, again, there's just some instructions, and then there's a speaker, so the students can click that speaker over and over and over again to get instructions as many times as they need, and they will also read the question over and over and over as well. And sometimes they will also be able to have the responses read to them as many times as necessary as well. The next slide is a sample of the grade 6 through 8 MAP reading item. You can see it's a little more in-depth, font smaller, questions are a little more rigorous, and again, there's multiple choice at the bottom. Here's a math map question for grades 3 to 5. On it, there's always a calculator option for the students. There is the question, the multiple choice as well, and then usually at the bottom, as well as the other slides previous, it's not on there, there would be a next button that would command the computer to go on to the next question.
And so you keep on hearing about this computer adaptive test. What exactly is that computer adaptive dynamic? Well, there is you can think of the MAP tests as one long, deep bank of test questions. So when the student at the outset sits down at that computer, The computer puts forth one grade level question. Okay, that's the baseline. So then the difficulty of the subsequent test items changes based on the student's response. As students answers correctly, the answers get more difficult. If the student answers incorrectly, the questions become easier. The students are not expected to answer every single question right. So what you have with this computer adaptive type of assessment is they do provide a challenging test for every student. So each student has the opportunity to succeed and maintain a positive attitude towards testing. Consider the case of a very high-achieving student. That student, maybe for the first time, will experience not getting all the answers correct, and maybe not being bored and not just checking things off, and will be challenged. Consider the case of a student who is struggling. That student who is struggling may not try because they're already frustrated and not putting forth a great amount of effort and not being able then to demonstrate what they know and what they don't know, and the teachers then would not be able to zero in on what is that student's learning level and target certain skills. So the fact that the key phrase here is that these tests are dynamically built. They're dynamically built because of that interaction between the student and the types of tests, so they are able to pinpoint that sweet spot, that instructional achievement level for every student. In terms of the larger picture of MAP testing in Littleton, MAP tests are administered 3 times during the school year in testing windows that are established by the district. The MAP for primary grades were administered to the grade 2 students at Shaker Lane in reading and math, and students in grades 3 through 8 are taking the MAP tests in reading, language, and math. Now, each of the MAP tests are broken down into components or subject areas. Within reading, the components for the grade 2 MAP, you see, deals, and there's much more of an emphasis at grade 2 with the foundational skills, but then you see certain themes and content area focus areas developing, vocabulary use and acquisition, and literature and informational text. Similarly, you have certain components that continue from grade 2 actually through grade 12 for math, the operations and algebraic thinking, which emphasize more conceptual perspective and skills in math, numbers and operations, more of a computational bent than measurement and data. Now here, this RIT scale, it's something actually to Google. It is interesting, and if you Googled it, you got to have 2 spellings, or you can't have 2 spellings. RIT stands for the Roche unit, and sometimes that's spelled R-A-U-S-C. Sometimes it's with a U, and sometimes it's without. It's an equal interval scale. Now that sounds like a fancy thing, but a yardstick is an equal interval scale. The inches are the same always, no matter who you're measuring against that. And what we do as parents, okay, we measure the student's height chart. I mean, that's something, you put it on the wall in your house and you see how student, and just think of, we're doing the same thing with the MAP assessments. And the key that I emphasized earlier, or I mentioned earlier, is every item on a MAP assessment is anchored to that RIT scale. That's why you can have comparisons across grades, across groups, across time. Now, coupled with the interim assessments is instructional resources. And Mr. Dallaire will tell you. In the next series of slides on the instructional resources and on the map reports themselves. What the two of us have done is we have taken screenshots from the trainings that our faculty had last year from the NWEA consultants. And those screenshots, throughout those screenshots, you'll see like little circles with a number in it. And literally, it is the screenshot that was utilized for the training, because those numbers call the teacher's attention to different aspects of the reports. We utilize these screenshots for a very important reason. These are sample reports. They are from schools that don't exist, and the names are not the names of Littleton children. When our teachers utilize these reports, those reports are populated with our student names. So, I just wanted to give you that background before Mr. Dallaire continued.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? We need like a TV timeout or something like that? Right? So, I'm going to talk about what used to be called the Descartes, but now it's called a Continuum of Learning. I used to work in Lawrence Public Schools, and we used MAP there. And when it first came out, Descartes was this binder, like this thick. And no one ever wanted to use it. No one ever wanted to carry it or flip through it. So with the evolution of technology and the way this has worked, they took this and put it here. So this learning, the Continuum of Learning, is a much aligned resource that MAP gives us that we should use to drive our instruction. Says it right here what it does. Orders specific reading, language, math, skills, concepts by achievement level to align to state standards. Links MAP or the MPG test scores to skills and concepts students may be ready to learn, and translate raw data from students' assessments into actionable plans for instruction and grouping. What does this all look like and mean? Something like this. So this is kind of the old form of what the Descartes Continuum of Learning looked like. And the same structure or philosophy continues today. It's 3 columns. And the column to the far left, or right, I guess, in this case, would be skills that students really need to build. Those are the foundational skills. The column in the middle, which would be the middle regardless, is what they should be working on presently. Those are the skills today that they need to be successful within their current grade level. And the third column, we'll call it the other one, those are the skills to enhance, to enrich, to build those students up to that next level, whether it's more rigor or building up to that next skill level. And same applies for the mathematics. Math is a little more broken down because we have a little more let's see, targeted groups with the standards and the Common Core, and everything within the standards are broken down into other standards, and you can see them all there. So again, same applies. The far column, skills to build. The middle column, what we currently need you to be on, and then the far column, skills to enhance.
Now, these icons reflect phrases you've heard a lot. And people may say, what does that mean? We have, a bullet for targeted instruction. You've heard about tiered instruction. You've heard about RTI. And the reason why we are inserting this slide here is to demonstrate that we're going to be talking about how MAP helps, to use the superintendent's favorite verb, actualize. Okay, that targeted instruction and tiered instruction. It does give the teachers the instructional tools and the raw data about what each student individually, subgroups of students, small learning groups of students, the classroom as a whole, their skills and content area knowledge. And so this really informs the teacher's repertoire to deliver that instruction. And you're going to be hearing echoes of these phrases in targeted instruction and tiered instruction and meeting students' needs, differentiated instruction. You'll be hearing all the faculty members talk about how they utilize those reports to find that bullet, okay, to target that instruction. The uses of, before we bring the faculty members up, just, as an overview, with the individual student or classroom level, the MAP assessments really help teachers plan individual instruction, form their individual student groups, structure the overall curriculum, and monitor progress monitoring over time. That's a key part of RTI, that progress monitoring. And the MAP assessments help you do that. At the district and school level, we take a look at MAP for different purposes. And last year, even in our first year of implementation, we did this. We utilized the MAP assessment data to identify at-risk learners for RTI placement, for placement in the intervention programs you've heard about in each of the schools, to inform student placement in courses, identify school-level trends, and monitor district and school performance regarding growth and proficiency. And actually, the school committee had a very key example this August and September on how the MAP assessments can inform resource management and allocation when the middle school principal very skillfully, with appropriate data, brought to the superintendent and his school committee the MAP data on reading, and made a very cogent argument for the need for a reading specialist at the middle school. It's not something that is, fluff. It's not something that was just a good idea. It was something that is there, evident in the real data. And it also facilitates communication with parents, and we're going to get better and better at that. We sent out student progress reports on the MAP at the end of the year last year, and we're thinking of doing it as we'll be discussing at different times during this year. And last year, faculty members relied on individual student progress reports in conferences, the spring conferences. And we feel that this becomes more part of the culture here. It will go on. At this point, I'm going to ask the faculty members, the elementary faculty members, to come up, and that's Vanessa, Pete, and Rita, to talk about their perspectives on the reading and the math at the elementary level. So I'll just turn it over to the three of you, and you can decide how we'll go from there. They're each going to be talking about from their own perspective and their experience with the math.
Rita, go ahead.
Sure.
I have a few notes.
I'm sorry, can I just ask you to use the microphone? It's
Of
important for
course.
the television broadcast, because
Absolutely.
that's where that audio is going. Thank you.
My name is Rita Mckinley. I'm a reading interventionist for grades 3 through 5 at Russell Street School. I was plan on talking about this in terms of the different reports and how they're used by teachers in the classroom and how they're used for RTI as well. First of all, with the class reports, at the beginning of the year, teachers have the class reports from the previous spring. And this gives them an idea overall of the profile of their class and gives them an idea of how to begin instruction, how to frame instruction initially. So it's been very useful for that. It also allows them to create instructional groupings for literacy center groups and to pick appropriate materials for their students. Since part of what we get from MAP is results that are genre-based, that's very helpful too for identifying materials and identifying appropriate instruction for their students. They know when their students have strengths in informational text, for instance, versus literature, and can plan appropriately. Part of what they also get for the class reports is the Lexile levels, and that's very useful for differentiating instruction, for identifying appropriate materials, and also for just recommending books to students at their appropriate Lexile level, or when conversing with parents, to be able to identify books that are appropriate for their student to read, for their child to read. We also get Lexile levels from Chief 3000, which we use at Russell Street School. So teachers can easily compare between the two of them. Achieve is all informational text, and MAP gives us lexile for across the board, so it gives us an idea of where the students are. For the grade level reports, we use those to identify students for intervention, students who would benefit from intervention. We also incorporate the oral reading fluency data that we collect and the maze comprehension data that we collect to identify those students. So there's a number of different data points that are used, but MAP is definitely a part of it, and the MCAS scores as well. We plan intervention groupings and target instructing so that we have homogeneous groups, and MAP helps us to do that as well. So it's been very helpful. For another report that we use quite a bit is the student progress report, and this is something that will actually get better over time. We use it to inform parents about students' current performance levels and how they've progressed over time. Since we only started using the map a year ago, right now we just have fall to fall data, but that we'll have more. We'll have more for each student and be able to show their trends, how they're growing over time, how they're and that'll be useful for parents, for teachers to discuss students and the kind of growth they're showing, and whether the interventions that we have in place for them have been working over time for them. Also, for teacher goal setting, the MAP has been very helpful that way. So teachers know that they can use this to chart the effect of their instruction over time. We also do the same thing for the grade level to see whether our core instruction is meeting the needs of our students over time, so that the majority of our students, hopefully, if we target our core instruction appropriately, will not need the interventions. So that's been very helpful. For our teachers, the Continuum of Learning is something that they're really just getting a feel for, and that's a very powerful tool. It's something that will be used more as we go forward. That allows them to integrate and break down the skill yards for each student individually. Another piece that they've been using is the student goal setting. So this is something where you actually engage the students in where they want to grow and where they want to put their efforts, and can engage them in part of the planning process, and that's a very powerful thing too. The way it works with MAP is that students, when talking to the teachers, talk about what is the area they need to work the most on, so their lowest goal, and by working on that and setting a plan for that, they bring up all perspectives of their reading, in this case, goals. So that's a perspective on Russell Street Schools use.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Holm, and I teach the little ones. You need to remember I teach the little ones when I'm talking. I teach second grade, and we are the only grade that takes the MAP. We're the youngest kids who take it. Keep that in mind. So last year was our first year that we took MAP, and we did have a trainer, a live person, and we did have a computer-based training, and it was very front-loaded. We learned everything about MAP. We learned how to give it. We learned how to read the results. We learned how to differentiate. We learned it all at once, and it was a lot of information. And then we, as teachers of little tiny people, we said, okay, you know what, we got to put all that away and just figure out how to train little people how to take an online test, because it's difficult. And we spent all year figuring that out. Because we have, not only do we have kids who can't see, who can't hear, who have one hand, but we had kids who, it was brand new how to use a trackpad. So we said, well, we just had brand new had Chromebooks. So we had to figure out, well, are they going to use Chromebooks? Are they going to use the mice? Are they going to do it in the lab? Are they going to do it in the classroom? Are they going to do half and half? And all those kinds of things. So there was a lot of logistics to figure out with the computers. This is the first time they've ever taken a test online. So pretty much the whole year was spent on that. So we at Shaker Lane haven't spent a lot of time with all the other differentiating and curriculum driving and all that kind of instruction. So that's going to be more this year, going back to the training and figuring out what to do with step 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and all those kinds of things. So for us, in second grade, there are both pros and cons to the MAP test, as there is with anything. And interesting enough, the pros and cons are the same elements. They're just two sides of the same coin. So pro number one is that the test is adaptive, which you've heard so many times. Since the questions change to respond to the learner, the results offer a very unique perspective, different from any other test we've given our kids. As a teacher, I can see the performance levels below and above my second grade, as if I've given every single child 4 or 5 different tests. And knowing this information can help guide individual instruction, both remediation and enrichment. And that's great. And pro number 2 is management. The tests are 57 questions. Remember that they're 57 questions. Results are available instantly. As soon as a child finishes, you can find out how they did, which is amazing. And if I were to correct 21, I have 21 kids, 21 different tests at 57 questions each, and break down those scores, you saw that each one has like 4 different strands. I'm not going to tell you exactly how long that would take me because my principal's here, but it would take a really, really long time. So that's an amazing pro, how fast those results are. And pro number 3 is that the tests are very, very thorough. Both the reading and the math tests have the 4 strands. It's not just a little bit of reading, a little bit of math. I mean, they're extremely thorough. In the math, it's like operations and algebra and how do you think about this and geometry. I mean, they're very, very thorough. And they report the student's strength, the student weakness, and how they progress in each of those areas. And that's amazing. But now the cons, the flip side of those coins. Con number 1 is the test is adaptive. So the adaptive nature gives information about individuals, but it does not give a true picture about the class as a whole. So it's not very useful to inform curriculum decisions about whole class instruction. And this is what I mean by that. Because the students were asked different questions at different levels, I don't have a sense who got them wrong because we didn't go over that material yet, or they just don't understand it yet. When everybody gets the same test, I can use those results to assess if more teaching is needed in certain areas, or if a particular question was confusing because so many students got that same question wrong. It's an apples-to-apples comparison, but this MAP test can be an apples to pineapples to motorcycles test. Con number 2, management. While it's wonderful to have the test results instantly, it's a true disadvantage not to be able to see the errors. We just get a total and a percent. As teachers, we study errors. If a child scored low in numbers and operations, usually we look to see if he added instead of subtracted, or wrote 39 instead of 93, or if he legitimately struggled with a strand. To my knowledge, there's no way to access that information with this test, and that's a big piece of the puzzle to be missing. It's hard. And con number 3 is that the test is thorough. It's 57 questions thorough, and that's a lot for second graders. The test is not timed, but they must finish. And my students averaged 46 minutes, and so that's the average, so that means that there were also kids who it took a full hour for. In second grades, our assignments are 15 minutes. So you're talking about a kid sitting there for 45 minutes to an hour behind a screen taking a test. And that's a lot. And so you wonder, at some point, did they glaze over and time out? And again, you can't look at their mistakes, so you don't know. So as a primary teacher, I am mindful that the MAP is one assessment, it's not the assessment, and I know to expect some discrepancies between its findings and the classroom tests, because there are some discrepancies, and to continue to assess student progress in a variety of ways. So a lot of information is great, and it's good to get it from different sources, but for my little guys, it's still something that, as the second grade teachers, we're concerned about. You know, we've got some questions about it. So, Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so since I'm at both schools, I'll try to tie up the testing experience through my point of view. And Vanessa and Rita both kind of covered exactly everything. But from the role that I come at it from with math data and dealing with maybe administrators and teachers and parents, our map is the student's individualized learning plan. So I know that we have tons of concerns and questions still out there about how exactly we're going to use this. I think that we can use this as a tool, a different tool at our different levels. We just have to actually sit down and figure out what exactly we're going to do. But with the data, we kind of look at it and we look at trends within what's going on. So at grade level meetings, I'd meet with teachers and we look at different trends. Or in one case, maybe we'd set RTI groups, as Rita said. Or another time, we'd look at maybe some challenge or some real strengths that are going on within that time frame, within that calendar year, or within that strand, or within that grade level. And as we get into some of the highlights, we can see that. But in the meantime, I'm going to kind of throw this back to Jerry Lynn, and I think we're going to bring up some middle school. Yeah. Okay.
I'm Diane Tricana. I teach 6th grade ELA.
And I'm Amy Manheimer. I teach 8th grade math.
And Amy and I created this slide that talks about the 3 primary reports that we use at Littleton Middle School. We use the class reports, the individual student progress reports, and the learning continuum. Do you want to add anything to? So with the learning continuum, it really it helps me know the skills that the students have mastered and what they're ready to learn, both in reading and in language. And I've been able to use our flex block time to pull small groups of students together to reteach skills or to move kids forward in more advanced skills. That's been a real positive with the MAP data coming in real time for us.
One thing that's great with 8th graders is they're very familiar with computers and they love to use them. So anytime Chromebooks come out, they're super engaged and ready to do what we have, which is different from 2nd graders. The class reports break down each class to show where the students are in the bigger group. So where I have 5 classes, I can look at the class overall and kind of see where the students fall in. So if an activity is happening, I know how to group them, so we can group them heterogeneously, homogeneously, and the groups will change over time. If a kid is showing growth, or depending upon the topic or standard, those groups would change. It's also used to assist students in setting personal goals, so we can use them to show where their areas of weakness are and their areas of strength, to kind of show them where they might need to focus on. For example, geometry tends to be an area of weakness for many of the 8th graders. Learning the formulas and just applying them comes to be a weakness. We can also use to build up to that skill, so going along with the learning continuum, we know where the kids are at, what they've mastered, and then where we're trying to push them and where to go. It's also great because, well, right now we're only in year 2, but when the now current 3rd graders get to 8th grade, I'll have that 6 years of data to look at over time. And we can see trends. We can see maybe one dip in their score and say, maybe that day they had something going on and it wasn't really reflective of where they are. So over time, the data is going to become more and more valuable as well.
And also for me, the Lexile levels that are reported are very important. So when we're doing literature circles, I can match novels to students' Lexile levels, and they can be theme-based or authors, but I know that what the students are reading, they're able to access and comprehend the material in their reading level, which is really important. And when I referred to FlexBlock, the bonus of using that time is I can pull students from my 5 different classes. So I'm not necessarily keeping kids from one class together. I can pull groups from across 6th grade to meet their needs all at once.
Well, I think going second,
I know,
A lot was
I
already
think they did a
covered.
very good job covering everything.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so now it's time to wow you with charts and graphs and fireworks, but Jerry Lynn nixed me on the fireworks. We didn't have it in the Title I budget. So what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about some reports that we use. And I know that this is a lengthy presentation, so I will definitely...
We're doing fine, so please don't, this is
Oh,
good, this is
all right.
good. And we're right on
We're
time,
doing
so
fine?
No worries, keep going.
All right, perfect. Sure?
Right, we're not like second graders, we can hang in there.
So, like it's been said, results are on demand immediately. They're reported using the following scores. RIT, as Jerry Lynn pointed out, so we use a range, a growth, and Lexile, which is our projected reading level. And the key reports that we're going to talk about are the individual student progress reports, the class and grade breakdown by RIT, the class and grade breakdown by goals, and our district summary reports. So our first one we're going to look at is our classroom breakdown by RIT, and it's colorful, and color is the in thing when it comes to graphs. So if you look at it kind of quick, it's all numbered up, and I don't know if you can really see the numbers too great, but the thing that stands out most is, I know I'm away from the mic, but right here shows us in a nutshell how we're doing as a whole, and green is good and red is bad. If you get further into the graph, it breaks it down into individual students and percentages, but if you just kind of take that overview look at it, you can get a pretty good snapshot of what's going on in that classroom or grade level. Here it is again broken down, and we talk about individual students. Here we have some key information on the graph or the chart. We have the test date, we have the actual RIT range, we have the percentile, which is the national norm percentile, the Lexile range, so this is a reading or English language arts breakdown, the actual test time, and then there's a column A, a B, and a C for each of the goals, and each of the goals is broken down into its own individual RIT as well. Our next report is our sample map report, grade breakdown by RIT. So again, it looks like the classroom breakdown, except this is the whole grade snapshot, and in our case, it's also the district, because again, we only have those grades at each school. So again, it tells us the same thing. You can kind of get a quick overview or snapshot by looking at the colorful grid. And then as you move down, you get into actual students and percentages. And this one is actually mathematics 1, so you can see how it's broken down into the 4 goal areas, which would be, this is a middle school one, so we're looking at real and complex number systems, algebraic thinking, statistics and probability, and common through all grades, standard geometry. So our next report is our sample map report, class breakdown by goals. Am I going okay? Mm-hmm. Not too fast. All right. And here, this one is our actual student breakdown by goal in the actual band that they fit in. And I don't think that made too much sense as I said it. So if we're looking at our reading, and our reading is broken into our 3 goals, which are our rows going across, and then our columns going up and down are the actual RIT bands, and the further to the right side is the lower end of the RIT band, and this side would be our higher, further moving achievers. So you can see kind of, again, on a quick look, where the mean or majority of our students in that class or grade are falling. And you can kind of see right in our middle, 191 to about 210 band. And then from there, what we would do is we would go into our Descartes or our learning continuum and find out what exactly is our plan of action for those students. Moving on, so here is our sample map report, achievement growth summary report. And what this does is this takes our students and it gives us our growth percentages versus our national norm or the national average. And as you look at it, Littleton is consistently higher than the national norms, which also pushes us to make another decision. Do we use the MAP norms or do we push for a more rigorous Littleton norms? And that's a conversation, again, as we move down the road. And so then that brings us to the norms. Look at that for a lead-in. And then I'll bring Jerry Lynn right back up.
So, as I indicated earlier, part of the reason why we adopted the MAP testing is because it was such a large sample of testing over a long period of time. But these national norms are important in that they contextualize students' growth by grade level. And NWEA conducts studies and recalibrates their norms about every 4 to 5 years. In the materials that were sent home to parents at the end of spring 2015, the 2011 norms were utilized. Now, the 2015 norms are being utilized. And what this gives is mean RIT scores for students at each grade level, the beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of the year. And this, as I said, contextualizes students' achievement and growth, and it provides that larger context for those discussions that we talked about earlier with the uses of the assessments. Now, this is a sample report that went home last year, and you see that the bars are utilized to display the students' RIT, the district RIT, and the norm, the national norm. And there was sort of a quick reference guide for parents on how to read that student progress report. Beginning the winter 2016, this is what the sample reports are going to look like because there's more than one data point. So we wanted, when we were talking about reports that go home, we wanted to show you that there are different reports.
Also with the bar graph, it would just kind of get convoluted and the bars would just started to get mashed together. Mm-hmm. It would be a hard read for the parents. So the bar graph with the plots are just an easier, neater, cleaner piece of paper or PDF email to look at.
So with our first run-through, we're showing you highlights at the elementary level and the middle level for reading and math. And we're trying ourselves to figure out a way that is meaningful and, make meaning out of this vast amount of data, and have it tell a story that is illuminating and informative in terms of the learning profiles of individual students and classrooms and grades. So what we've decided, and this basically, the structure of this graph that we prepared basically mirrors the structure of our conversations in grade level data meetings and in meetings that the principals and administrators have with faculty. We take a look at, the number of students, the mean RIT in Littleton and how it compares to the national norm. It gives us an idea of students who are above the mean and low. And then, like MCAS, like other standards-based assessments that are based on learning standards, we take a look at areas of strength and areas in need of improvement within that subject matter. and we take a look at the, like, for example, in reading, grade level successes, is the literature and informational text, and what then at each grade level are common points that we need to consistently address or strengthen.
I guess that's one question here. So
Sure.
the previous slides we've seen had sample data that wasn't reflective of
Exactly.
Littleton. This is actually
This is the
reflective of Littleton.
only Littleton,
So my
data
initial
point.
comment is, those second graders are kicking it.
the little ones are with the and it is, I mean, I watched. I mean, we all sort of swarmed on to Shaker Lane. The principal's smiling, but, he was
But
he
there
was
good-
there at the doorway
good
receiving
reasons.
us. Yeah,
We had to.
we
We
did.
had to.
We had to.
We had to. We needed to make sure that we had
Yeah.
enough staff in the classroom, excuse me for interrupting.
No, please do.
Enough staff in each classroom to be able to ensure that kids were comfortable taking the test and they were going to be able to use the technology effectively. As Vanessa said, this was their first time taking a computer-based assessment.
And you'll see them in the rest of the presentation. In terms of logistics, it echoes, from the district and school level, it echoes every single thing Vanessa said about there was such a steep learning curve in terms of implementing this. And last year was year one, and now, just like with RTI, just like with anything we phased in this phased implementation, the second year we're going to get traction. And what is our focus areas in getting traction this year? So yes, this aggregate is, we purposely didn't want, as I said, with the other slides, we just use sample. But this is Littleton data. And so Pete will do the math.
Okay. So, again, we're just going to look at the math, but it kind of is reflective of as just the same as reading was. Again, second graders, yeah, big hit. But with what's being said, what Vanessa said, and what Jerry Lynn reiterated, that it was a learning year for students and staff. But look how well we did in a learning year. That's kind of how I look at it. And everybody struggled. Teachers struggled. Students struggled. Administrators struggled. The tech people struggled. Parents struggled. Everybody was struggling with this. Bettina and Natalie putting in the rosters. It was a learning curve for everybody. And for everyone to kind of pull it together and bite the bullet and be flexible. And this just shows that if we kind of pull together, what's going to happen. And it's like Jerry Lynn said, year 2, year 3, it's called MAP for a reason. We want a map of your students' learning in future and how to build that path to success. So talking about success, definitely elementary mathematics. Again, we're looking at last year's cohorts, but they pretty much, they shine. If you look at 5th grade, and I know that's going to be next week, but again, these numbers were reflective and predictive of how they did on the MCAS as well. So if we really are looking for an accurate snapshot of how Littleton is going to do compared to the rest of the state, this is going to be a pretty good predictor. So again, if you kind of look at our grade level successes across the board, geometry and measurement and data, especially with the measurement and data, where you do area, and area is a multitude of repeated addition and multiplication and breaking apart and lots of different things. We did really well with that. Some of the things that we need improvement on are the numbers and operations, looking at numbers differently, learning how to do, subtraction more than one way, adding different tools to the students' toolboxes, so again, they can be successful as they move up to that middle school.
And middle school reading, you can see with the different size of the grade 6th, 7th, and 8th grade cohorts, the mean is not too far apart. It's always above the national norm. And an area of improvement is throughout informational text. But an area of success is that vocabulary acquisition and use. So we see from, the way that our students' learning profiles stacked up in this first round of test administration, at each grade level, the areas of strength and areas of improvement were similar.
This is the highlights of the middle school math, and I really have no right talking about this because, they're sitting right here, and this is kind of their success, and Mark's standing right here too, but since I'm up here, I'll just save it for everyone. Again, you can kind of look at and see how our students are consistently above that national norm. Our grade level successes, number systems, statistics, probability, and I know those aren't easy things to handle, at least moving up to the high school, the pre-algebra, the algebra. I'm not going to pretend I know a ton about it because I cut myself off about 6th, 7th grade math. In our areas for improvement, it's that conceptual thinking, and I'm not at the middle school, but Mark or anybody else could speak to it, but it looks like maybe in that 6th or 7th grade, we're moving away from that more concrete, the manipulatives, to that abstract, that find for X type of situation. And then in 8th grade, geometry, I think that starts rolling into like trigonometry and things like that, and I'm not even going to get into what's going on with that. All right?
Okay, all right. This is the implementation curve and what was involved last year. Last year, year of preliminary planning and implementation, the identification of roles and responsibilities was key, and that took about 2-3 months. And we had to define those roles and responsibilities at the district and school level. It was a primary focus of the administrative retreat in August and the September and October administrative council meetings. And it took a lot of coordination between departments and between schools. We had to establish a district-wide test schedule, just an overall umbrella of dates, fall, winter, and spring, not to conflict with any of the state testing. And then within those dates, each of the principals had the challenge of developing their school-based testing schedule. And finally, we had to communicate our expectations for classroom teachers, what their roles and responsibilities, and this was an important venue of cooperation and interaction and co-planning between regular ed and special ed teachers to identify students needing accommodations. Now, there was also a lot of interaction between the technology and the curriculum department. This is a complicated platform, and it is all hands on deck on this platform. We are indebted to Mike McEachern, the technology coordinator, for verifying bandwidths, verifying the use of equipment, and venues for testing. The online testing cannot be accomplished without the preparation according to the specifics of those files set forth by NWA, and Natalie Branch and Bettina Coral prepared the student and the staff rosters to support the online testing for each test administration. Now, obviously, the fall upload is the most detailed. And then, winter and spring, it's taking a look at students who move in and move out and changes. But it continues because students are, quote-unquote, owned by two teachers. If you have a special ed student, that student needs to be identified under the special ed liaison and the classroom teacher. And if you miss one student name and one teacher, that reporting is not, going to be done correctly, or the test administration and the test proctoring itself is not done correctly. It is very detailed, and you really need to be accurate. And so, as I indicated, the technology connections were supported with the district grade upgrades in infrastructure. This is something that came to school committee's attention as part of budgeting, it's part of long-range planning, and this testing would have never gotten off the ground if those upgrades had not been previously accomplished, because that was the only way we could have simultaneous MAP testing in multiple classroom venues. Our testing window, what is recommended by NWEA, is 3 weeks. Otherwise, you're not within the band of those norms, and we could have not had that testing in that time frame if we had, only one computer classroom. And then we keep on talking about how the reports are available immediately. It would like a tree falling in a forest that nobody hears. I mean, if the teachers did not have their MacBook Airs there to grab that data and take a look at it, it wouldn't matter if it was available immediately or not. No one would be able to look at it. There was a lot. As the teachers emphasized, there was a lot of professional development online, and during our November 4th, during the full-day PD day, we had the middle level and elementary level faculty participated in a workshop. And then when it turned to school-based, Littleton providing professional development by department, by grade level, Pete Dallaire led groups for faculty at each of the 3 schools. We would not have been able to have the beginning level understanding of those reports that we had last year without his expertise. And you see the training sessions that he led. Our next steps, as I said, we're trying to develop traction, is taking a look at that correlation in terms of projected proficiency between the MAP data analysis and MCAS, and utilizing the MAP assessments as a DDM, setting procedures and parameters for individual students, for grade levels, for growth, and as the teachers indicated, it really was a lot just to know how to administer the test, proctor it, identify what the reports say. Now it's time really to take a look at those continuum of learning resources and how they break down the skills identified by instructional level for students. And we always talk about Vision 2020 and how it is a blueprint, a greenprint, a map to our decision-making and budgets. This implementation of the MAP assessments reflects, is based upon, is supported by, and supports and furthers the initiatives in the district strategic plan. And these slides just set forth those connections with our strategic plan. Under curriculum and assessment, the goal number 3 is to use multiple forms of data to measure and evaluate student achievement and to meet the needs of diverse learners. That's why I had that icon of the bullet and differentiated instruction and trade. This actualizes, this gives teachers and administrators and grade level teachers the data and the tools in order to do that. Finally, there's multiple connections with technology and the implementing of technology within the district. And then for further information, we're putting this on the website, and we had 2 Title I meetings, 2 Title I parent meetings, and we included the NWEA Parent Toolkit. It's on their website. And parents reacted very favorably to that document. So I would urge you, if you're interested in learning more about NWEA, or as a parent, what it is and how, to maybe translate, someone else translating NWA for you than Pete and myself. It's a very interesting document. So at this time, I'll have everyone join me, and you're welcome to ask any questions.
Alex?
Can you put it down there?
Sure. Mark?
Sure. I have a couple of questions. First, is there a reason this isn't being administered at the high school as well?
I can take that question. What we wanted to do is ensure that the system that we put in place was meeting the targets that we wanted them to meet. In fact, it's a timely question because John and I have a meeting next week to talk about potential for grade 9 administration. Personally, as an educational leader, I haven't gone beyond grade 9. I've stopped at grade 9, and for a variety of reasons. We can talk later if you'd like. But I think at the grade 9 level, there are some advantages to make sure that our kids have those necessary skills before they go on to those senior courses, so to speak. So it's something that we're discussing, but we wanted to move cautiously before we made that decision.
And I would emphasize the first bullet in the basic features, that they're interim assessment. So having that baseline, interim data on interim assessments is important to direct instruction and interventions and tiered instruction at the grades 2 through 8. It dovetails with many of our interventions and our methods of grouping and regrouping students, and so we felt we would get the more bang for our buck at those grade levels. And there is a very, very strong culture of co-planning and common assessments at Littleton High School, one that existed even before I got there, and so there are other measures, common measures of student performance other than standardized testing that are already firmly in place at Littleton High School. So those are the two things that were foremost in my mind. And in answering your question, I would also add that during the presentations, during the deliberation process at the district level on implementing MAP, the superintendent asked, we had these 6 to 12 curriculum coordinators involved in that as well.
Okay.
I just add one thing of particular interest to us at the high school, at least for me right now, is it's early, it's not widely known at the high school in math testing, maybe among some of the faculty, is how do we use the 8th grade results to inform course selection, placement, as well as interventions that might need to start in the fall. I think it could be really useful in that way. And as Jerry Lynn has mentioned, there's so much assessment happening at the high school. I think we should proceed cautiously.
And that sharing of MAP data, grade 8, that transition from the high school to middle, this is part of our, needing to get traction this year. I mean, you saw there was like 4 slides on just setting up the process and setting it up well. So now it's the time for departments and folks to get together on that sharing.
I understand. I think it's very brave to roll it out at all 3 schools that you did at the same time. But it does seem like it would be useful to have the same, if the results are a continuum, then I would think you'd want to keep the same standardization at least through 9, if not grade 10, right, where things get a lot more specialized. So, and I can understand, not swallowing everything whole. So I had a couple other questions on the reports. One thing I found, maybe it's just early because you don't have enough data in the reports, but if you looked at the grade level successes and the needs improvement, you would see things like geometry being successful for 3 of them and then drop, right? And what would we attribute that to? Just one sampling, or is it?
We don't know yet.
The first thing you do when you see that, first of all, you need enough testing. But secondly, you go in and you take a look at the nuts and bolts of the various curricula and the vertical alignment. And that's one of the many things that's powerful about this. if there's a needs improvement in an area, and then it jumps up to exceeding standards and all of a sudden goes back down, it does pose some questions. And it's a great check and balance in terms of how are we developing our curriculum, and is that vertical alignment as strong as it should be. Just another comment to your first question. I see NWEA as a precursor to forging into expeditionary learning and best practice and next practice. And in order to do that, we need to be assured that our kids have that foundation. And this is one way of ensuring that in fact is true. And it's really interesting as we move forward. For me, this isn't new. I've done this for many years, but implementations are very similar, I must say. And it's interesting for me to see the almost exact same patterns that I've seen in the past. So
my other question on reading some of the reports are like, when you go to compare some of the numbers, can you take like the percentage of students in a grade above average, or do you take the scores above average, the ratio above average, and how are you going to track those things to see? And I assume there's also going to be, on the same line, I assume there's going to be a report that basically tracks the class through, right, going forward? Obviously, you don't have that if you only have one.
Right.
We could get any type of data that you just said. We have the ability to run a district report that would put the data in any sort of sortable spreadsheet, and then from there you can even run predictors and things like that. But we're able to run district, school, class, teacher, student, draw all the way down to even the standard and run reports by standards.
What's interesting, and that's a great question, is at the middle school we're experimenting with something called MyPass, and it's created by Edgenuity. And Edgenuity is an online consortium that we use for advanced learners, and we use it for other reasons as well. But what MyPass does is it links right into the MAP testing. So if we have advanced learners, we can correlate an individualized program with MyPass, and the teacher has an infinite number of resources to do that. The same holds true for struggling learners. So we're really excited about this recent
And it also has a
development that
partnership
we've
with
bought
Khan
into.
Academy, where we're
Right.
using that intervention as well, at least at the middle, the 3 through 5, and I don't know if they're using it at maybe the middle school or the high school, but we can import their students' MAP and RIT scores into that Khan Academy program, and from there they'll create that learning path that constantly challenges them. Instead of going back and reteaching, they already know that, so they're pushing and reteaching and developing those new skills.
The original focus was to try to, there's so many possible permeations of the reports that we came up with agreed upon reports, and the focus was to inform instruction and impact students individually. So, what you're looking for is what we will be looking for over time are those big picture reports, but we really wanted to hit the ground with impacting students right out of the gate as quickly as possible. So we picked 4 or 5 or 6 powerful reports that teachers could agree upon at the classroom level and share data points at. And so now, as the years go on and the tests are given, we're going to expand the knowledge base and use the more broad-based reports.
So just to rephrase my question in a little different way, when you're looking at how you're doing above the average, do you take the RIT scores and compare them, or do you take the percentage of students that are above average?
We could do both.
I mean, which way is more beneficial for you? Because
What happens is we look at the mean RIT, and that will kind of tell us the percentage of, it's pretty much one is the other, so one's the RIT if you wanted to look at actual RIT, and then how it translates to grade equivalents, grade in year and month, and then the percentage would just be kind of how does Littleton as a percentage stack up against, I don't know, Westford, or whatever it is at that point. Did that help?
Yep. Okay.
And throughout time, when we have enough data, we may change those benchmarks.
Yep.
And if, we may have a national benchmark, an international benchmark, but we may not be satisfied with that, so we may create our own higher benchmark.
I'm done. I think it's very good.
It's intriguing.
Yeah, no, thank you for the presentation. It was very complete, and I think two of my questions got answered during the course of the follow-ups there. Particularly, there was correlation to MCAS, and then the word Common Core and standardized curriculum. But you tied it up really nicely at the end there when you said that these, by actually standardizing the standards,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can utilize other programs to supplement the educational material without us having to start from ground zero to customize those programs for people, which I think was a very powerful piece of that there. And I particularly like, that it's individualized and tailored towards the instruction of the students. And then this question here gets back to more philosophical and making sure that we've got a balance here. There was a lot of talk on time on testing, standardized testing, testing to the mandates, and whatever other things show up in the news every week there. So this here, I like it because it's tailored for the benefit of the student. You also get a benefit as the educators to know what to tailor there. You said 45 minutes per run. Is that 3 45-minute sessions for each student for the year?
For the year.
Or, because there was like 4 or 5, I couldn't tell if there was 4 or 5 different tests or
No,
one test.
one test
57
involves
questions.
those 4 components.
Okay.
So actually, we felt, and we didn't hear differently from teachers thus far, and we are continuing to take a look at the test schedule, but at the elementary level, and to a certain extent at the middle level, the MAP testing is done in a shorter amount of time than grade and GMAT.
And and that's a good point. We had other tests that we used before. We began to question their usefulness and their validity, so some of this is replacement time.
Right. That's where I wanted to get towards it. So it sounds like there's 3 45 to an hour sessions for this
Per
for this test
trimester.
here. Then we have MCAS, which takes a couple of days for that. What other testing do we lay in, and where are we getting the benefits from those?
Well, it would be the formative assessments that teachers develop. That's predominantly the other testing that we use.
A lot, to sort of paraphrase the debates about testing, students don't get any smarter by being tested more often.
No.
Okay? I mean, that's basically the crux of many critics of standardized testing. However, students deserve tests that teach. And these, I would submit, are tests that teach, because it does pinpoint and define at a granular level the instructional level of students and their mastery of learning standards. And so you teach to those, it helps define what the students know and are able to do. And that's why I feel that they're, tests to teach. That's the way I would answer
Yeah, no,
that
I
philosophical
like the
question.
form of this test and what we're doing with it, and I think I heard what I wanted to hear, which is we're eliminating or replacing tests that are not getting us to where we're going, and that process is ongoing and continues, so that we're not testing for the sake of testing, we're testing for the sake of advancing the students.
Plus, we're converting, and I wanted to say this delicately because I think we're doing a good job converting or transforming, whatever word you want to use, away from passive instruction. People tend to utilize passive instruction when they don't understand the challenges and strengths of their students. And unless you provide teachers with that information so that it becomes cogent and salient, it's very hard to break that pattern. But in our district, I think we've moved mountains in that area, and our teachers are always energized to go into those things, but they need the right tools to be able to do so.
Well, and separate from moving away from sort of middle of the road, stand and deliver, to targeted instruction, even with MAP, we're evaluating what tests to administer. At the middle school, this presentation did not, we did not include the fact that last year, in our first year of MAP testing at the middle school, we administered the MAP General Science Test. And the science faculty and the principal, we took a look at it and said, is this something that you feel is helping define and guide and measure student achievement in science? And the faculty decided no. So we are now 2 through 8 having the MAP language, reading, and math. And even within the language, reading, and math, we're looking at how teachers utilize that information. Because this is not a hobby. I mean, this is not just something we pass our time doing. And I have no, there's no, you know, I really am not being sarcastic. There's basically an implicit, if not explicit, promise to teachers that if we're going to take up your time to do something, it better save time or direct it in a different way. We did that with the online progress monitoring for, you know, RTI. We did that with Symphony Math. We're involving teachers in very time-consuming things, and it better help save time or direct instruction or have some value added, because it's a lot of time.
And the snicker is because that's what I wanted to hear, that that's what we're doing, and we're not just consuming time. Thank you very much.
All right, good. All right.
Thank you. I also was glad that many of my questions were hit earlier. In terms of the conversation with the norms, and I know that's a conversation that you're still in the middle of in terms of, are we going to hold ourselves
And
up?
so is NWEA.
Right.
Because the norms just got published in August.
And so there's the question if the national norms were already, it seems that we're above that. Do we want to hold ourselves more rigorous? What are we expecting? Because the NWEA isn't something that every district in any particular geographic is going to take, and I'm sure you've already considered this, comparing it to the national norm might not mean the nation's average if every student in the nation were to take part in this. It's just relative to the other schools that have decided to do math testing.
How many schools are taking this across the country?
Many.
So at that point, it becomes statistically valid.
Well, it becomes statistically valid against those.
Over 1 million students.
Right, and it's over like,
Worldwide,
what,
I mean, it's worldwide.
40 years?
They service roughly 10 million students each year and over $500 million in the last 40. I think that's a lot.
I think so too. What I think we should be cautious of is, are suburban districts using this more than urban districts, or are districts in the Northeast using this more than districts in the Northwest? Because just because it's used by a lot of folks, like the SAT, for example, has a very different demographic than the ACT. Both are statistically valid, both have been tested countless times. Not that it's not a valid measure, just that when we look at those numbers, we say, compared to other people who have taken this test, not compared to everyone, whether they've taken the test or not. And I'm sure that's a conversation that's been had. I just wanted to point that out.
It's not been had, it will be ongoing. And I appreciate those points you made, and that's part of making meaning out of the numbers. A collective process.
Remember,
come together.
our focus at the beginning of the implementation process was to provide data for teachers about their students, their learning strengths and challenges. That's our focus right now. The norms, we have enough norms. I mean, with MCAS or PARC or whatever we use, will they become part of the picture? Well, they're going to have to be if we use them as DDMs. So it really depends on what part of the conversation we really want to have. The purpose of introducing NWEA was to give teachers enhanced tools in terms of how their students learn and what their learning strengths and challenges are. That was a primary focus. A secondary spill-off of what we've done is we've given teachers the opportunity to use these as DDMs, which they're normed reference. They actually have a standard deviation rather than locally developed assessments that don't. So I think that was a secondary outcome rather than a primary focus.
I think that's good.
Yes, Alex. So the primary goal is student growth, and we're using this as like our ruler for student growth, and I think that Jerry Lynn might have touched upon like the history of it and just the actual consistency, and so taking those factors in, that gave us the best picture of how our students are shrinking the gap and growing into like independent learners as well.
And I think it's really important to hear what the superintendent said, that the original primary focus was to inform instruction at the most individual basis possible, you know, and then how we're pacing against others really right now is not the top of our focus with this particular test. It will, after 2 or 3 years, give us a lot of good information to set our own norms most likely. I mean, it does a couple other things that don't even reflect up there. When we went through these slides, you saw a column that just gets buried and lost in it that says how long the child took to take the test. I will tell you that the teachers look at that column just as important data, just like what the score is. That tells us a lot. Johnny took 21 minutes to take a test. Well, what's going on with Johnny? And somebody says, well, yeah, man, he's blowing through every test the past month and a half. Well, what's going on socially and emotionally with Johnny? Does he have a SLD in math that we didn't know about that's coming out late? So that there's a lot of unintended data buried in here, not, you know, around the numbers. You know, it also informs our purchase and our implementation of supplemental materials. Our librarian is looking at the department which says we have informational text issues. And you hear this a lot from my friends in the primary grades. They say, younger grades you learn to read, and later you read to learn, right? So when they get to the middle school and they're reading to learn, and I'm not saying it's not happening below me, but it's really happening at the middle school, she's now looking at much more impactful nonfiction text, and in collaboration with their colleagues in the content areas to make sure that this slide doesn't say informational text is as strong in 2 or 3 years from now.
Thank you.
Good point, Bill.
I'm going to skip ahead because we've hit on a lot of these. There were 3 methods of instruction mentioned in the presentation in terms of core class instruction, targeted group instruction, and individualized intensive instruction. And we've been doing that for a long time in this district, maybe with different words, but it's generally, I think it's a great practice. And we're doing that at all 3 levels for both students who are struggling, well, I guess not the core class instruction, but the 2 other types of instruction, the targeted group and the individualized, both students who are struggling and those who are doing very well and need a little bit more challenge. That's excellent. In terms of using it to inform testing, and Daryl already spoke a lot about time on testing, and that's part of my update on the MASC conference later is that discussion, and I actually mentioned to a lot of school committee members who are frustrated by how much testing is going on, that there are ways that we can use DDMs to be smarter about testing. So even though there are a lot of decisions going on at the state level that we as school committee members don't have a direct say in, there are ways to use testing in the district at the local level.
To make it meaningful.
To make it meaningful and to make sure that it's helpful to the academic and the educational process. And then I tooted our own horn a little bit up here and said, you know, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, or we've been talking about it for a couple of years now. We're just implementing it last year, I think you said. But I was pretty excited about that. In terms of getting students to sit still for an hour at the lower levels, is there the opportunity for us to break up the testing segments? So instead of having an hour-long segment, if the questions are randomized or aren't in a particular order, would a half-hour session work?
There is.
What's
happened at the second grade level would be, we kind of went with the flow of the class, and as the majority of kids finished and we saw that there was maybe like a handful of students left over, we didn't want them to feel singled out. So we have the option to suspend the test and have them test again later. So if they had a break or went to recess or lunch, come back in, not feel like the weight of the world of the class looking at you to finish. I think we've all been in a situation like that before where, you know, and you kind of rush through it. So at least that's what we've tried to do in not just second grade, actually, in all the testing, at least 3 through 5 as well. go with the flow of the class, and then we'd always have makeup sessions or extra time set up in the afternoon where kids could not feel threatened and come down and take as much time as they needed to finish. And I know that goes against the time on testing, but again, we don't want to rush.
We don't want to rush them, and we don't want to add pressure to the
Right.
situation. My question was a little bit more focused on, can we shorten the total amount of time? Can we shorten the questions on the test? It's 58, if we go to
No,
30?
no, you can't do that.
Just because it's
It's a known
NWEA
test.
and they...
It just gets rid of the validity and reliability of the testing if you do that. I mean, that's something we're looking at, Alex. It took a lot of dialogue to make that decision to go down to grade 2. So we didn't go any earlier. We could have gone right to K, but philosophically, as a leadership team and as a superintendent, I have issues with that. But at the grade 2 level, it seemed to be the right thing to do, considering the testing that they were using at the school wasn't doing what they wanted it to do. So we're going to watch that. I mean, there's so many bigger stories that we could utilize, and we're just focusing on this now, but this is just a fulcrum to so much more. So, we are watching that, and I think if we notice that kids are really having trouble concentrating and it's taken away from the bigger picture, we'll do something to help out. But we need to give this a fair enough shot to make sure that we're not just reacting to the change in the way we do business as well. So,
When I was going through the schools just a short time ago, we would generally have a standardized test, MCAS, at the end of the year, and I think it's great that we're able to say, well, how's your instruction, how's your learning after the first trimester, how can we help you? So we don't find out the following October that almost a year and a half earlier you really struggled with, whatever was taught in the previous
Numbers and
fall.
operations.
And that sets you back pretty far, and I think that's a great benefit to using the MAP testing. Have we considered, because we're testing more frequently, not every unit, not every month, but 3 times a year, and maybe teachers are doing this naturally, to limit the other testing, lest it become duplicative? We don't want to be adding a ton of time in testing if we reduce some of the testing that you would do normally, a quiz, a test, maybe a shorter quiz or test if you already have the NWEA MAP assessment to look at your students. Is that going on? Is that something that's going to be talked about?
well, that's part of the total package. When you look at what we do in our classrooms, assessment is part of the other components of curriculum and instruction. So it all has to be in balance, and of course they're looking at ways to ensure that balance is maintained. We don't want to tip it too far. What we're wanting to do is have good information so that our teachers have the tools and the information to maximize our students' learning capabilities as they go through our
But as
school.
the superintendent echoed and I stated earlier, the major decision was to discontinue the grade in GMAID, which had in a very important place here, but had outlived its usefulness in terms of timing that the testing took, predictive nature for MCAS, and rigor. And we felt this adaptive online computer-based testing was, standards-based to all standards and mastery, and gave us much more valuable information. So to answer your question about time on testing, the biggest decision was to substitute MAP for grade and GMAID.
And as teachers get more confident using the data and these graphs and these tools, I think that they can use that to drive their instruction, to have more focused target areas, and use that data to ultimately cut down on this testing time. If, based on the data, the group in front of me has a pretty good handle on that skill, then why are we going to spend a whole bunch of time on that skill? Just touch up, maybe have a center, and let's go on to an area of focus that we really need to work on.
Thank
So
you.
hopefully that's kind of what, as teachers get more comfortable, hands-on, again, we only have 1 year in, so
Yeah.
as we learn and get with this, then I think we'll roll our sleeves a little more.
And that process would probably happen naturally as the
Yeah.
teachers get more comfortable. I just have 2 questions, and my second is for Kelly, so I want to give you a heads up on it.
Which one? No.
Yes, Kelly to my left, you're right. You took the NWA map last year, is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask them a question. I'm going to ask you, what was that like? What are your thoughts generally? We're all trying to do what we can for students, but none of us has taken it as a student. I'm sure some of the administrators have taken it, at least in part. I'm sure our staff has taken it as well, but none of us were in the student position. So knowing how that was helpful then, did you notice how your teachers might use that information? Any general feedback, that would be very helpful. And then my first question, or second to last question, Amy had talked about how by the time this year's third graders get to the 8th grade, the teachers will have years and years of data on each individualized student on how they're doing. And that is great, because we want our teachers to be ready to go on day 1, and we've been doing that, but this, I think, is going to be more aligned. Grades 2 to 8, possibly 2 to 9. Is there a meaningful way to look at that data, or is it going to be going through reams and reams of, I guess, PDFs, so figurative reams rather than literal reams, but it's still going to be a lot of data to go through? Is there
You can look at it with, right at the same time. It's all going to be right there for either one student, again, or a class look, or a grade look, or even a district look. You can have it right on that one. You're not going to have to flip through or hit sort or run a algorithm through Excel. It'll be however you order that piece of information from their database, you'll get it in either an Excel or a PDF.
And is there a way for that to be meaningful for
Again,
the
as
teachers?
we get more experience and
Yeah, we don't have that
how
data.
we're going to use
I
it.
have a comment about that. The one thing to keep in mind when you look at reports is that's information. That's not data. It's information. Data is used to create the information. So as you test year over year over year, you build up the data for a student or a class, however you want to look at it. You can then take the data and turn it in a lot of different ways of looking at information. So you're right, it would be a little sobering to think about, geez, I got to look at 6 reports for a kid and times 3 tests or whatever it is. No, I mean, you could do it that way. In the old days, that's exactly how you did it. You would get the binder out, whether you were at the bank or the insurance company or the school, you would get the binder out and you would just start counting. You don't have to do that anymore. The data's in there, and you just ask the question through a query or using spreadsheet technology or whatever it is, and I know that if I were in this environment, I'd be like, okay, they do a great job, but just give me the data, because I can take it and put it in my own spreadsheet, my own database, and I'll start doing all kinds of ways of looking at it, slicing, dicing it, amalgamating it, however you want to do it. So it'll be interesting to see, and you talked about it, is over time, what tools do we want, and they'll change. We'll use some for a while, and then we'll get rid of them, and we'll do other ones, and it'll be very interesting to see how it evolves. The usage of the data turning into information evolves over time.
And I'm sure that 6 years from now, by the time we have that much data, NWA will have changed the way that everything is formatted and probably made it more user-friendly and that sort of thing.
And in 6 years, it might be different. Instead of us being classroom teachers, we might just be learning coaches for kids as we go, just leading them in the right direction.
Maybe they'll be teaching us.
Right.
Let's not get carried away.
I was thinking knowledge check salary. Sorry.
Kelly.
Okay, so, yeah, last year I was an 8th grader and I took the map testing, and to be quite honest with you, I didn't really enjoy it. I mean, I don't like taking, called me old-fashioned, but I'd rather like write out an essay for the MCAS than take like a 40-minute test on a computer, because I just get like really bored with it, and like it glazes over. And I feel like I do better writing. But yeah, I like that the student would be shown the results like right when they finish, like you would get your scores and everything, and I thought that was nice to see personally where you were at and like what you needed help with.
Just as a follow-up, after hearing what you've heard tonight, does that change? I get, nobody, well, I shouldn't say that, because there are some weird people that love to take tests. I kind of like doing it myself, but after hearing some of this, does it inform your point of view? I know as a single person taking a test, you're like, boy, I can't believe I have to do this again. But, I mean, is it compelling to you to think about it as a grade in a class that it's going to help inform instruction? Does that make it a little more palatable to you?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely help within the grade.
You can still say no. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I would like to say thank you very much. Terrific presentation, very informative. We've heard about the map, and this helped a lot. I would ask that maybe later on in the year, when we've done it again, it would be great to get a brief update on how the implementation of the test in the second year, without necessarily all that infrastructure having to be built again, how it went for the students, the teachers, and the staff, just to help us feel better that, okay, it's getting easier as we go. That would probably be normal. I would ask, too, that we put this presentation up on the website, like as a special link. And it would be great if maybe we could talk to LCTV, if they could cut us a video out of this meeting of that, and we could make that part of that. And when we do that, can we send out to the parents that it's out there and available? Because obviously, it sounds like this is going to be an integral part of the district and the experience for the students and families for a while. So the more we can do to help them understand why it's beneficial and why it's worthwhile and what, what we're going to get out of it over time, I think would be great. So if we could do, not to be, in a hurry, but let's do it right. But when it's out there, let's let the parents know that it's out there and make sure that it's its own little thing that they can go to quickly and get it and take a good look at it. That would be great.
And if you'd like, next week before the MCAS, I can set up a couple of Chromebooks if you want to see what the actual test looks like, if you guys want to kind of get your fingers on it.
What I like is I would love to take it into a bar and not prove how much smarter I am than you. That would be cool.
Are you taking this?
Exactly.
But
Let's not include that in the presentation.
just so you know, when that happens, it's a student name that is then eliminated,
And you
because
can't
we don't
take
want
it
to
into
skew
the
the
bar and do it
data.
in the bar.
Right,
You can,
right.
because you can take it with you as long as you got the net. So if you want to sit there and that's what the buddies want to do.
Okay, well, after this bar talk, I do want to emphasize, with all seriousness, that this was a collaborative effort with the administration and faculty. And in the presentation by the faculty members today, what you heard is very, very illustrative of how the teachers know their content, think about it pedagogically, think about how assessment drives instruction, and take on new challenges. And this presentation could never have happened without all of the classroom teachers getting on that implementation.
That was pretty clear. I appreciate you reiterating that, but that was pretty clear. And as a school committee, we appreciate that. We really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
So tonight what we're going to do is, this is the first of several presentations we're going to do on the cost centers that we use when we do our budgeting presentations and analysis. We talked about this at Budget Subcommittee. We thought it would be a good idea to look at the cost centers, not necessarily strictly as numbers and dollars, but what do they encompass? What are we getting out of that? What are some of the issues that are being addressed by them, and things that we think about when we talk about them? So we're starting with a couple of them, a couple of the, I don't want to call them drier, but not necessarily directly related to day-to-day education in the classroom itself, but still important and definitely has an effect on the experience for the students. So we're going to do two. The first one we're going to do is transportation and buses. And what that encompasses is our regular education busing, our special education transportation, and other out-of-district transportation. Regular education busing, we have 8 buses running per day. We have approximately 1,200 students riding those buses, about 75% of the student population per day. We budget this on a fixed contract that we put out to bid when the contract is up. Currently, we are in year 3 of 5. That contract is roughly $450,000 per year. One thing to keep in mind about regular education busing is we do charge fees. We charge about, right now, we're getting about $100,000 collected in fees each year, which is about 22% of what we budget as a cost. We have not raised the bus fee since they've been instituted, so they used to be more like 25% of the cost, but as the transportation contract has gone up, the percentage of fees has gone down a little bit. Transportation for athletics and other extracurricular events, which is not a huge number, but it's not a small number either, are not covered in this cost center. Those would be allocated in, for athletics specifically, would be in the athletic cost centers, or where athletics is, and we'll talk about those later. But if it's something else, it would be in that cost center as well. Special education busing is provided by the Case Collaborative, which is not a fixed contract. That we pay based on the services we used for our students. We are actually billed in arrears on that, so when we budget it, we actually know how much we've been assessed, and then we can budget for that. We do try to keep an eye on it and understand, even though we're paying in arrears, we want to project where we're going to be. So that's part of what we do in the budget subcommittee work. Approximately right now, $500,000 per year. One thing that Steve Mark brought up, which I knew but didn't come to mind, and that's why I like this kind of presentation, because it gives us a chance to reiterate these types of things. Circuit breaker reimbursement does not cover transportation. It covers our out-of-district placements for the actual teaching or services provided, but not transportation. And at $500,000 a year, that's significant. We're not getting reimbursed on that. We have to pay for that in whole ourselves. You'll see in the parking lots at night, vans parked, and our buses are parked over between Russell Street and the middle school. We do not own any buses or vans. The buses are owned by the busing contract company, and the vans are owned by the Case Collaborative. We just park them there, but we don't actually own them, and we don't do any maintenance or fund maintenance on them. That's all taken care of by either the Case Collaborative or the busing company. We talked about, very briefly, the third line was other out-of-district transportation. That would be, we have a few students, very few, but a few, traveling to other districts due to special circumstances related to the curriculum that they need or their particular student situation. We also have some families providing their own transportation to SPED providers, and we reimburse them for doing that. It's about $20,000 per year for that other out-of-district transportation. You can see the budget trend here for transportation, and it's 4 years because that's when we went to this particular cost center structure. But it was pretty level for 2 years, then it went up about 2.5%, and then it's leveled again. Again, partly because the regular ed transportation is a fixed contract, so we wouldn't expect that to move year by year. The SPED transportation could indeed move. It hasn't over the last several years. It's been around $500,000 a year. And that hasn't changed, so it's been pretty flat for that. That, I believe, is it for budget. I'm going to do another, for transportation and busing. I am going to do another cost center, but I thought I'd pause here if we have questions or input or comments. Darryl?
Yeah, I have one. On our bus fee there, I'm glad we haven't had to increase it there, but we also don't have full discretion on changing that because we are required to provide a certain amount of busing anyway.
Correct, that's a good point.
So we can't just bump that fee to keep offsetting that number because we have to provide the level of transportation.
The way the fee works is that, we can only charge for middle school and above aged kids, and they have to live within 2 miles of the school. If they live beyond 2 miles, it doesn't matter how old they are, we have to provide busing for them. So conceivably, we could raise the fee, the actual fee that the family pays, but we couldn't expand the population that is paying the fee. That's fixed.
Right, we can't expand that fee to cover the mandatory busing that we have either.
No,
right.
Impossible,
somebody's saying, we could just increase our fee.
Yeah, no.
We can't because we have to provide a certain level of busing anyway.
Right, it's K through 6. If they're more than 2 miles to the school, we provide transportation. The district pays for the transportation.
Right. It has to, by statute, right. And we've talked about it, even if we did want to raise the fees a little bit, maybe, let's say just for the sake of argument that our goal was to cover 25% of the busing contract because we feel that's achievable. My concern would be that as you continue to raise the fee, fewer and fewer people are going to use it, and then it becomes diminishing return, almost to the point of it can become negative return And now, instead of covering 22%, we're only going to be covering 18%. So it's not, I don't want to do it anyway. I don't even like the fact that we have a bus fee, and we've all talked about that over the years. But raising it, I really don't think it's not viable for, beyond not being something we want to do. I don't even think it would be a good idea financially. All right, anything else on?
Do we have an idea on the bus fee, how many kids, what percentage of the kids are subject to it?
Not off the top of my head, I can
Great
come back to you with that.
Let's follow up on that one.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great question. That would be an interesting number. All right, anything else on transportation or busing? Okay. So the next cost center we're going to talk about is facilities and maintenance, and that covers our custodial staff that works for the district and our employees of the district, our contracted custodial services, our utilities, our HVAC, other maintenance services, and trash removal. For custodial staff, we have 3 full-time staff at the high school, which covers school hours and nightly cleaning. We have 1 full-time staff each at the middle school, Russell Street and Shaker Lane, that just covers school hours. We have 1 full-time maintenance supervisor who works across the district at all the buildings. We also use our full-time staff on an overtime basis to cover events, do snow removal, different things like that. We've talked in the past how we are well below industry standards for staff per square footage of coverage when we're cleaning our buildings at night or administering them during the day. There are standards, and we are underneath them. We make it work, but it does stress the system and stress the staff. And we've also talked, we are a little bit below industry standards for hourly wages, which is a concern, and it is something that we will talk about a little bit later. We're going to talk about our initial budget projections for FY 2017, and that is something that will be brought up again. Our contracted custodial services are contract for nightly cleaning at the middle school, Russell Street and Shaker Lane. We contract and get 2 staff each night at each building to do the cleaning at night. They also control access to the building by the community groups and other building users once we get into post-school day hours. We are currently in year 2 of 3 with that contract, and we do have 2 years at our option to extend the current contract. We have noticed that we've had significant turnover with 5 companies being contracted over the last 9 years to provide that service. Sometimes it's a situation where the contract ends, we put it out to bid, and it ends up we just get a lower bidder. But unfortunately, that's not the only reason we've replaced them. We've actually had to let go a couple of companies in the middle of a contract because we just weren't getting the services that we were paying for. So when we think about the custodial in-house, in-district custodial staff versus contracted services, the custodial staff, the in-district staff budgeted around $261,000 for the 7 full-time employees. And then on top of that, obviously, are the benefits that are paid on the town side that aren't reflected directly in our budget. For contracted services, we're budgeting about $186,000 a year for 6 full-time workers per night. When you think about that, the approximate cost per head count is roughly $37,000 for in-district, for $31,000 for out-of-district, or excuse me, for custodial services. But at some point, it's going to be worthwhile to consider expanding our in-district custodial staff at some point, weighing the costs and the benefits, because of the struggle that we've had with the contracted services, and we actually feel like we get a significantly better product when we use it in district. So just something that we can keep in mind as we go through the contracts, and we'll talk about it as a school committee. HVAC is another big component of facilities and maintenance. We're in year 2 of a 5-year contract. For that contract, we get preventative maintenance 4 times a year on the HVAC systems, as well as an on-call service tech if something comes up that's not part of the preventive maintenance. The other thing that's interesting is the contract covers replacement costs for system components. So it's almost like having insurance. If something breaks, we don't have to go find money to pay for it. It's already built into the contract amount that we're paying. One thing to note is Russell Street is currently under contract for the maintenance, but is not under contract for the replacement costs. It's a new building. We were under warranty for a while. The warranties are running out, but we still feel like we're okay because they're fairly new systems. From an actuarial point of view, it would probably not be worth our benefit to pay the contract price for that yet. But as that building gets a little older and ages out, we'll add it back into the contract, which would mean the cost of HVAC would go up. And of course, it might go up again when we rebid the contract. For utilities, we get our water from Littleton Water Department, we get our electric from Littleton Electric Light Department. Natural gas, which we use in all the buildings, to heat is part of a collaborative of 20 cities. We get about a 10 to 15% discount by virtue of participating in that. We get 1 to 2 year contracts on that. That's to actually acquire the gas. Delivery of the gas is a separate contract, and we use 2 or 3 different vendors on 1 to 2 year contracts to actually deliver it into the district. We also have maintenance services. We pay electricians and plumbers to come into the buildings as needed to take care of issues that arise. We also have our fire alarm security system cameras, which are becoming, when we were kids, it maybe wasn't a line item on it, but now it is. Occasionally use locksmiths. We have a couple of elevators that need services. We do painting and flooring. Occasionally we'll do some small roofing projects. And we also have to provide service on 2 LPS vehicles that we use, not for student transportation, but we have a pickup truck and a van that the custodial staff and maintenance staff uses. The budget for these services covers day-to-day expenses. If it was a capital outlay for an entire roof, that would not be covered under this cost center. That would be, it wouldn't even be covered really in our operating budget. It would be done on a capital budget that we work out with the town during the budgeting process. You can see here the budget trend for facilities and maintenance is pretty flat, and we actually went down a little bit last year. It's averaging a little less than 1% a year increase. And we've talked at length, we get our updates on the energy cost avoidance program that we put in place 7 years ago, and that is probably the biggest reason why we've been able to keep this flat. And remember also that the transportation has remained flat. Our ability to maintain these 2 cost centers, they're not necessarily the most exciting cost centers in the world, but our ability to maintain them and manage them the way we have has had a very significant positive impact in these difficult budget times on our ability to provide services directly in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. So, it's important that we keep an eye on these things. It's important that we manage them as aggressively as we can, because it will have a direct impact on the other cost centers that we feel are more compelling relative to the students. Any questions on facilities and maintenance?
Yeah, just one, and I think I mentioned it to you, Steve, earlier about, the cost of our maintenance contracts, which includes emergency replacement versus scheduled replacement through the town capital budget. Have we done a cost-benefit analysis of that to know what, would it be cheaper for us to ask the town for capital to replace a couple of the old ones versus trying to pay the maintenance and then get maybe a cheaper maintenance contract as a result of that?
Right, so no, we haven't worked up the numbers yet, but I had started that conversation with our HVAC contractor technician just to get his thoughts on that, and we'll work some of that out.
Okay, that's a good point. And again, lends to that theme of it might be a good idea because it might free up.
Because they'll take it out of the operating budget.
Right, versus the capital budget. That's a good point.
I had a couple of questions on the facilities. Do we have an idea, what do we end up paying in overtime, and would we save money by hiring another person that way, would be one. And are any of the costs offset by agencies using the schools, right, and where does that?
So we do rent out the facility, and that the revenue from that goes into a revolving fund, and we use that revolving fund to pay some custodial overtime. We also use that to buy some equipment that's not budgeted out of their operating budget, and also some repairs to the facilities as we go through the year. So that fund's out there as well. As far as the overtime, the problem with that is you need overtime in multiple buildings at the same time. So you run into a scheduling issue and a personnel availability issue. So I think that would be a little bit more difficult to work out.
I think also to keep in mind is that sometimes the overtime is reaction to a situation like a snowstorm, where we wouldn't necessarily need that head count day in and day out. And then in terms of going back to, do we charge the outside groups for events when custodial coverage? We do. And we do a good job of balancing access to community groups, Littleton community groups. They do pay. But at the same time, when we have an opportunity to, not squeeze them quite as hard as we would do an external group, a third-party group that isn't necessarily directly connected with Littleton, as, maybe a sports group is, or the drama club, then we were able to do that too. So.
Yeah, the biggest revenue on that, if I may, Mike, is we rent the theater all out, the Performing Arts Center. That gets rented out a lot on weekends. Obviously, the high school has priority, so if they need it on the weekend, it's available to them. But that is rented quite a bit on, it's Indian Hill music, there are some Indian cultural events and things like that. They use the auditorium on weekends. And then there is a volleyball league in town that rents the middle school and the Russell Street pretty much through the winter. They've been a long time rentee for 12 or 15 years, so that generates probably, those are the two biggest revenue generators as far as that rental income.
Any other questions? All right. So we're going to keep doing these types of presentations till we make it all the way to the top. It'll kind of start at the bottom, like when we do the budget presentation, you'll see how we list the cost centers, and we're starting at the bottom and working our way up. And Alex will do a couple of presentations. We're going to kind of go back and forth until we hit them all. So that'll go through the rest of the winter until, we get past January and February, which will segue into budget discussion. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, old business. We are on the update on green community application.
Last meeting, we had a discussion about the town's green community application, and I was asked to sign off on a couple of areas. One was vehicles, the other one was on jumping onto the program we weren't sure what the expectation was in terms of compounded energy savings through time. Mike and I met with the town administrator, Keith Bergman, and at the end of the conversation, we had a good understanding that they're not going to hold us to those projections, those 20% targets. It's a town-wide efficiency, and we also had a discussion about where the revenue would be coming from, and at the end of that discussion, we felt comfortable with me signing the forms and proceeding. So we had some assurances that answered the questions that we had around the table last meeting. So we wanted to report back to you that we felt fine moving ahead and supporting the town's venture.
All right. Any questions or comments on that?
I just had one question. Do we know how far back they're allowed to use the data from?
I don't have that answer.
Current year.
Is it current year?
Yeah.
I thought it was back farther. My understanding was farther than that, but I didn't know when.
That's not the impression I got, because we asked that question about what about the energy initiatives that the school's already done. My understanding was that's not going to be included, that this year is going to become the base year. That's my understanding. I'll double check that again, though, so.
It was either 14 or 15 was going to be the base year. I don't remember which year it was specified.
Okay.
All right, school committee goals. Alex?
Yes. So my apologies on sending this out to folks a little late, but it's essentially where we were at the end of this discussion last meeting, except reframed a bit. I added a summary statement of the goals up at the top that just reads, the school committee's objective is to advocate to advance student learning, which was one of the things we wanted to move around, weren't sure how to incorporate, but wanted to focus as the focus of what our goals were about, and to support the actualization of the district's mission and vision. You'll remember at the end of our last conversation, we had decided to take the sort of smaller of the numbered goals and transform those into more of our focused goals, so we would be able to better articulate what we're doing while still spelling out the elements that we were looking for. So it's pretty straightforward, at least I think, because I made it. I hope you'll agree with me.
Correcting your own test.
Yeah, I may get an A. But I did try my best to include the same language from the last goal. Sometimes I would change them around a little bit for simplicity to make them a little more clear, and sometimes there were duplications, but otherwise it's the same language, the same intent. They have not varied much from the last time we've discussed this. What I would like to do, because I know most of you haven't had the chance to look this over in detail yet, is if anything jumps out at you now, let me know. Otherwise, I'd be happy to, if you have any comments, email it to me, and then we'll bring it back for a final, probably final presentation at the last time, or it'll just be, yep, looks good.
Any comments, thoughts on that? Just a reminder, we do meet again next week, so conceivably we could turn this over one more week.
I'm just reading them now, so I really haven't.
So let's do that then. Let's go ahead and take a look at them, digest them, give Alex whatever feedback you have, and then if we look good, then we'll put on the agenda.
Sure.
If it is already, we'll just add under old business, and we'll go ahead and see if we can finish it out next week.
Great.
Sounds good.
Thanks for that, Alex. All right. Continuing on with Alex, the MASC conference that you went to last weekend?
Yes, last week into the weekend. This is my second time attending the MASC conference in Hyannis. It was a good conference, miserable weather, but a good conference. And I felt that I learned a lot, but what was also really interesting to me was hearing from other school committee members and superintendents from around the state, from a variety of districts, suburban, rural, urban, and then urban districts that are in receivership. So that was a very different world than the one that we were operating in. The focus, I think, of the conference was threefold. How do you help students with social and emotional learning? And how do you better support those students? How do we help students in poverty or who face other challenges, including students who have special ed needs? And then how do we better advocate for resources and better operate our school districts to do those things and to support all students where they are and to help lift them up? I attended a number of workshops, including discussing cultural proficiency, developing safer school climates, measuring social and emotional learning, which I think we're ahead of the curve on, but it's a new area of discussion, I think, in the educational environment, and it was a good conversation to have. I think it's one that's being had nationally and statewide in districts that are paying attention to this, and I count us among them, and I'm proud to. There's an interesting concept that I learned where we have district report cards now mandated by the state to follow a certain framework to report our MCAS data, or soon to be our PARC data, or door number, whatever we end up with next week. Hopefully we'll know. And there is a framework being developed in Somerville where they report that, but they also say, well, we want a report card to say holistically where we are as a school district. And so they have different ways of measuring holistic education. So they will include some of their DDMs. It will include some of the MCAS or PARC or whatever it is that Somerville used last year. But they also look at where are we in terms of our wellness? Where are we in terms of our student participation in different extracurriculars? Not that needs to be 100%, but that's one measure of how engaged your student body is. For instance, I think if we looked at Littleton and said, well, how involved are our students? And we looked at our athletic program participation rates, we'd say we're doing pretty good. That's something to celebrate, but also something to just know about. If you're a family looking to move into the district, you can weigh different districts and say, well, this district is really active in sports, and that's something that my kid's really interested in, or something that we really value, so we want to move to this community, and that's something that I think we could advertise as a district. And then they also show, well, they're still working on this, but they're hoping to show data that they might collect from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey or something else like that, so you can say, well, how healthy are our students? Where are they doing really well? Let's say they recently implemented a new program to reduce alcohol use, and so they saw a big decline in alcohol and drug use, and they wanted to show that on the report card. And the they, of course, have a consultant or two working with them on this project, and they're hoping to bring it on board, and they would pilot it essentially for the state. The state, I don't think, would say everyone's required to do this. I think that sort of defeats the purpose of...
You don't think so?
I'm pretty darn sure, and the reason is because they've been talking about this as we do so much more in our schools than what the state is telling us to do. And some of what the state is telling us to do, we would do anyway, a lot of it, I think. And even within the things that the state is telling us to do, that the state measures, the way that they report it and the way that they require us to report it is not always enough to get the point across. There's value in that, but as our discussion earlier when we were talking about the NWEA math assessments, one assessment is just that, it's one assessment, and it could be a really great assessment, but it's still one assessment. So that's something that I'm really eager to learn more about and see how that develops, because I think that's something that we've been talking about, or at least the values behind that as a district for a couple of years, about really supporting social and emotional learning, about looking beyond the test scores. We are a district that tends to test well. How do we focus on closing those achievement gaps while also making sure that we're not just focused on a couple of assessments and a couple of numbers that we send out in the district report card. So Somerville's hoping to send this out, I think, probably right next to their required state report card that they would send out. They would send out this other 1 or 2 page document that's easy to read, doesn't have a ton of data, but shows you a good picture and gives you information for where to learn more. So that was part of the focus of the social and emotional learning, talking about state and federal issues. We learned a lot about and heard a lot about funding gaps, which we've talked about quite a bit. Also in terms of mandates, although the testing conversations we had a week ago in Hyannis are now out of date as of this afternoon, and the conversations we have tonight will be out of date as of Tuesday of next week. So it's a moving target. We'll see what we can do. Hopefully we turn out okay. We'll take whatever the department decides as best we can. And then conversations about charter schools are happening more in the state. We don't have that conversation here that often, but I think it's important to let everyone know that it is taking place, and it doesn't have a direct impact, as big of an impact on our school district as it does in a lot of other school districts, but in terms of the way we fund the charter school reimbursement at the state level, the more charter school schools that come online anywhere in the state will impact how much districts are reimbursed, because they're not fully funding that line item. If they were fully funding that line item, I don't think it would directly impact us, unless another charter school popped up here, which I don't think that it would. The delegate assembly must have been listening to our school committee meeting whenever we last met, because they followed what the committee decided to a T. There was also a sense of the assembly that was taken in terms of a moratorium on high-stakes testing, which was not offered as a resolution. It just sort of came up on the floor, and it doesn't have any binding power. It was in terms of what MASC should or should not support, but it was something that someone wanted to do. And so the assembly voted that high-stakes testing right now is changing so quickly, and also when it's so high stakes, it's sort of taking away from the purpose, which is to better inform. So there was a sense of the assembly that there should be a 3-year moratorium on high stakes testing, on the high stakes nature of it, not on the testing. The testing would still continue to get data, but we shouldn't prevent students from graduating based on these new assessments and based on some of the assessments that we've had for a while that we realize aren't working. And that, of course, is much better worded on the NASC website than whatever I've just said, but that's the gist of it. And then Kelly was also down in Hyannis, Literationally Conference, and attended different workshops than I did, so I'm not sure if you wanted to talk about one or two that...
Yeah, I can spend a few minutes on this. As I've mentioned many times, the workshops that are offered at the conference are meaningful to both school committee members and superintendents. They're very high quality, very well thought out. A number of the conferences or seminars I attended, one was titled The Heart of Learning, and it really talked about the importance of social and emotional stability prior to a student being in an optimal learning environment. And that's something that within education in the past 10 years, we've heard a lot of dialogue about accountability and testing, but the whole child has been left out of the conversation. So it was a pleasant evening to have somebody speak about the importance of developing the whole child and being concerned about social and emotional well-being. That theme was present throughout the whole conference. Cultural proficiency was also another seminar that really speaks to the need for staff and communities to be aware of cultural differences. And people come in with their belief systems that may be a little different than the towns, for example. And we need to really truly understand their perspective and also the perspective of the students that they send to our schools. And so education, cultural proficiency needs to be something that's ongoing in our school district as well, because our diversity is increasing every year. Meeting, as Alex mentioned before, meeting the needs of students that are living in poverty was also a very interesting webinar, or seminar more correctly. Recovering high schools, that's one area that's really I'm passionate about. In other districts, I've had alternative high schools that focused on very specialized delivery for homeless students, etc. And something that once you've been involved, it never leaves you as a leader, because it's so important. We're very fortunate in this community to by and large not be dealing with those kinds of issues, but they are out there, and you don't have to go that far before you're immersed in that kind of setting. Another one I attended, making the most out of your collaboratives. I'm the chairman of the CASE Collaborative, so that was kind of interesting now that we're conversing more with area collaboratives to see if there are any efficiencies that can be gained as we move forward. I attended the Park Common Core update, and it was good to reaffirm what I already thought. And so it's always nice to when that happens. Another interesting one was boys in crisis and boys at risk. There's a lot of interesting information in that seminar, and we're going to bring that. I'm going to bring that back to the administrative table as we talk about making sure that we're cognizant of some of the methodologies that one can use to engage boys in the educational process. And it starts early on. It doesn't start at middle school. It starts right in the elementary setting. And of course, I had to attend to one working with the DESE because when I go home at night and sit at the kitchen table, sometimes I'm a little perplexed, so I thought I would get better at interacting with the Department of Education. Unfortunately, my wife was running it, so it really wasn't much help.
Bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah, and I hope she never watches this. School committee meetings, or I'm in trouble. The last one that was really inspiring was educating creative and entrepreneurial students. And one point that continued to resonate with me is we have a tendency in society to make decisions on the past rather than the future. And when you look at the accountability movement for the past 14 years, you can really trace some of that direction back to the previous belief system in terms of what our economy was, what our societal norms were, etc. And the message that was really delivered was that we need to be aware of that, but we also need to be looking forward into the future and not being caught up into what the past has brought. And that has a lot of implications for how we educate children. We talk about, or I talk a lot about being future ready. And future ready means a lot of different things. And it's very hard to get into that paradigm if you're designing your educational system around what's happened in the past. So there's some good thought process during that seminar. So it was a great opportunity to meet new people and also rekindle relationships that you've had. And I had a couple of comments. I was sitting at a table with a number of school committee members from all over Massachusetts, and they talked about some young guy in the delegate assembly. And I kept prodding. I said, what did he say? And on and on and on. And I said, where was he from? And it was Alex from Littleton. So I wanted to pass that on, that Alex made a very positive impression at that delegate assembly, and the way he spoke. The feedback from me is that you were very reasoned and you were very well prepared. So I just wanted to pass that on, not only to the school committee, but publicly. You represented us very well, Alex.
Thank you.
So, thank
You must have been surprised to hear those things.
I was not. I was very proud.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both for going. Any chance you get to, either formally or informally disseminate the information you had or what you think, your experience can help inform us, the administration, that would be great. Okay. All right. Last under old business is CPR Smart School designation. Dr. Harrington.
Okay. You handing those off? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Here's some extra packets from the last time we were here that include information from the American Heart Association about the CPR Smart School designation. And at the last school committee meeting, we had the fire department chief, as well as firefighter here, and the wellness coordinator for the district, and PE teacher at the high school, Meredith Perry here, speaking out on behalf of the CPR designation or Smart School and the requirement of CPR at the high school for graduation. We also had a member of, or a representative, the Director of Community Development for the American Heart Association, Patricia Malios, speaking on behalf of this requirement. And she's joined us tonight, and I'll ask her to come up shortly. But just to recap for folks who may have missed the last meeting, the rationale behind this proposal is really rooted in a public good. It's 30 to 60 minutes of instruction at some point over a 4-year period that would be required by the American Heart Association. We already exceed that with about 2 hours of instruction in partnership with the fire department. It's rooted really in community safety. I think Chief Wozinski spoke passionately about that. The superintendent did as well. It's a life-saving skill, there's no question about that. It increases response time. We never know when you will need it. So that was sort of some key points brought up. The chief, I also want to thank him publicly for his partnership over the years. We've been doing this now for a number of years. He's looking to expand it to the 8th grade in the near future. And he's also committed to supporting the training and providing it through his budget as well, or if it need be, through volunteerism from the department and other community members if we ever ran into an issue with training. It's not really a cost issue. We will be sending an additional 100-plus CPR-trained adults into the community each year. And that, if you just do the multiple on that, you can see how much safer Littleton becomes as a result of that. It's hands-only CPR. This is non-certification training, so it's not really intensive. Like I said, it's only 30 to 60 minutes that the American Heart Association requires. In 12 states, in my districts, 12 states currently require it for high school graduation, so we'd be joining them if we were to do this. I have slightly altered the proposal in response to feedback from the school committee and other folks. I sent this on to the superintendent just before the meeting, so I apologize I don't have a written copy for you. But it's very similar to the last proposal, but if I could just read it to you, and then for further consideration, we'd give you a written copy as you proceed. As part of the requirements for graduation, Littleton High School, in partnership with the Littleton Fire Department, will provide instruction to students in cardiopulmonary resuscitation and the use of an automated external defibrillator, AED. Based upon their participation in CPR and AED training, Littleton High School students will receive at least 1 hour toward their 50-hour community service requirement for graduation. The high school principal may waive this requirement for special circumstances, and that's just a provision that we usually keep in there for things like this. But students could receive potentially more than, and the superintendent reminded me of that, more than 1 hour of community service towards their 50-hour requirement. So I just wanted to make a mention of that we wrap this into community service. We also mentioned the fire department explicitly in it, that this is a partnership, and I really appreciate the feedback from the committee members it's compelled us to really think this through, make sure it's something that is doable and sustainable. We certainly knew, everyone, I appreciate you all also acknowledging the worthiness of it. There was no one questioned that. It was just a question of, is it sustainable was really the fundamental question, I think, from the committee members as far as a concern. Patricia, I don't know if you wanted to come up and speak, or happy to answer any questions. We perhaps could join in answering questions you might have as we proceed. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Happy to say a few words. Certainly wanted to reiterate our support of this policy, I think, and I might have had actually some old notes in your folder. We're actually up to 27 states across the country have passed CPR policy. Yeah, so I apologize for that. So much better number, including New York, which passed it recently, and I believe all of the New England states have passed a policy. So it's certainly something that is growing in popularity across the country because states have really realized that, it's important. And I think we might have brought it up at the last meeting. Obviously, Massachusetts, we need to go town to town, so it takes a little bit more time. But I think what that allows is for each community to really figure out a way to make it work. So I think, John talked a little bit about kind of the time needed to do a CPR training. Certainly, a lot of districts are doing the full certification, but we do realize that that takes a lot of time. It takes, investment in terms of training and money and whatnot. So we do offer the option of doing a training 30 minutes to an hour, which provides the really critical hands-on skills. So I think that it makes it more doable, and for us, we want to provide the students with some sort of training. We'd rather have them trained in some of the skills. Obviously, a full certification is wonderful, but if we're able to give them those critical skills, it's obviously really important. And then from our organizational standpoint, we really would like this to be a required portion. I know that, there's some hesitation with some districts to make it a requirement, but for us, we want to ensure that all students are getting the training. So I think kind of the option presented here, including it within the already required community service component, they're already expected to do some of the service work, so why not just add this in? They can get the training, it kind of meets our standards for a requirement, and then they also get an hour out of the way, so they, kind of it's a win-win. So certainly would love your support and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Alex, any comments or questions on that?
Sure. Thank you. I think you really incorporated the comments and the concerns we had, and I think it works really well.
Yeah, just one, thanks for the clarification on the hands-only, because I also see several people require, the full certification as like part of being a lifeguard or some of the other activities. Would it be possible for them to apply the extended time that they use on that as community service hours now?
Sure. I think it's completely reasonable. That's really left at the discretion of the principal, assistant principal, to determine what will grant community service for. So there's lots of things that aren't as necessarily rising to the caliber of quality of that community service.
I was just wondering, since I know that's either a 4 or 8 hour class that they have to take to get the full certification versus just the piece there, and I didn't know if that would fall under your...
It's an interesting option. It's not. I don't think I'm not aware of anything in the community service guidelines that would prohibit that.
Okay.
And there will no doubt be students who well exceed through lifeguard training our requirement of a 30-minute training. It's roughly 30 to 60 minutes, and students will experience that twice at high school, 10th and 12th grade, and perhaps in the near future, as I mentioned, in the 8th grade. There are some students who struggle with completing their community service requirement. As much as we have students with 500 hours, and we have a lot every year that are in the hundreds, we have some students that I'm chasing down into May.
And that's why I like this option here, because it adds in this element here, but it's, I was getting concerned about the number of credits requiring for graduation and the other pieces there. I think this is a nice balance.
Falls right into it. They're already getting 1 credit for that, so.
I agree with Daryl's comments, and I think incorporating the extra hours into the community service would be beneficial as well. The one gotcha there is whether the middle school would do the same thing with their community service requirements if they're doing classes for the 8th grade, right? It'd be nice to have the same blanket policy for community service.
Do we require
Mark, the community service to graduate from middle school, or are we pretty much let them go to ninth grade no matter what? I meant in terms of community service, sorry. I think we're all that way. In terms of community service, do we let them go to ninth grade no matter what?
Yes, I mean, we have a really nice embedded philosophy of service learning, and we often talk to the kids about the requirement in high school. So ours is that experiential piece. The kids do have to be requirements tied to actually to their health last grade.
Yeah.
And then we pass it on and hopefully prepare them well for the culture of the high school.
My only comment was it's weird if they have different, what counts as community service is different between two schools, so it would be kind of nice to align them. That's,
Yeah, and so.
Oh, I see what you're saying, right,
Yeah.
right. There's no reason why we wouldn't allow it to be, right.
if they're doing an hour class at the high school and it counts as community service, and they're offering it to the 8th graders, it should count there too.
Oh, yeah, and
That's my only comment. The two policies have to align.
We're pretty liberal by definition, I think.
So.
Sounds great. I don't know if I comment. Although, talking about the kids who bank like 500 hours, and Kelly was talking about entrepreneurship, you know, you could start selling some of that off, and, you know, you could, that'd be interesting, to come up with some interesting models.
Tough budget
Sorry, I'm just thinking about my
Carbon credits.
Do we, so are you looking for an active vote on our part at some
That would be
point?
wonderful, because
Right.
what I need is some guidance on the committee, whether they're willing to enact this for this year.
Right.
I feel that won't be an issue this year for our students, since most of the seniors now have been trained already as sophomores. There'll be another training provided for seniors, yet to be held by the fire department. So if we missed anyone, we'll take care of them there. So, you know, I think we could make, with the school committee's approval, this effective for the current school year, the 2015-16 school year.
I feel like we have a consensus, and I appreciate the American Heart Association coming out again. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I would have got you a little closer to the top of the agenda if I could have. So if you guys are good, I would take a motion.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with this, and then, you know, in my, sort of my Christmas batch of policies, I'll update.
Oh, so you're going to do it in that, okay.
I'll update the policy there, but I think in terms of the sense of the committee and that we want to move forward with this, I'm fine with us moving on.
Okay. So let's do that. So we're in agreement on that, and we'll codify it into the policy when Daryl gets around to it, because that's how he is.
I'm fine with us taking a vote of the committee that you want to enact that for this.
You want to do that? Let's do that.
Yeah. So just so that it's,
Yeah. All right.
there's no ambiguity in
All
that.
right.
I mean, I'll catch the paperwork up.
Okay, good. So let's-
I make a motion that the school committee accept Dr. Harrington's proposal for have a CPR graduation requirement as part of the community service learning.
Beautiful.
Second?
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harrington. All right, moving down to new business, the October financial statement from Steve Mark.
Yep, so in the packet was a financial statement report through October 31st. Again, so we're 4 months into the fiscal year, we're 2 months into the education school year. So the percentages are right in line, really, where we would expect them to be. Just a couple of things that I should point out that are a little different than prior year reports. The special ed line, in years past, when I reported at this point in time, the special education percentage was much higher than it is now. That's because of the way CASE is billing now. So if you remember, CASE used to bill us twice a year, and by this time of the year, we would have paid that first assessment. We are now getting billed by CASE on a month-by-month basis on actual needs. So that's reflective in this line. So that line is kind of in line with where we would expect that to be. And again, the other thing to note is under the special ed cost center is the tuitions for the out-of-district students. Don't forget, we also pay using circuit breaker money as well, and so we always pay all the appropriated funds first, and then we start tapping into the circuit breaker funds, so we're right in line. Some of the other cost centers, the school administration, the facility and maintenance, again, so those numbers are reflective of the 4 months that we're into this school year, so we would expect those percentages to be a little higher, so I just wanted to point those out. And then there are obviously some areas of concern that we're watching. Our We're closely tracking our substitute line this year. We're watching our custodial overtime. That's typically a problem area for us. Our tuition reimbursement line, the early forecast for that is, even though we've increased that, we have a lot more teachers taking advantage of that program to the benefit of the students, and we're watching that line as well. So those are the kind of the problem areas right now. And then you'll see in the next presentation, there are some budget areas that Mr. Fontanello is going to address. We're trying to fix budget-wise into the budget for next year, and those are areas of concerns that we're watching for this year as well. So be glad to answer questions, provide additional information the school committee needs.
All right. Any questions on the update? Alex?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm waiting for Mr. Fontanello to show up, but I don't think my dad's going to be here, so I guess I'll do it. All right. All right, so what we're going to do now is Saturday, 2 days from now, in this room, the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee hold, I don't know if they call it the Budget Summit, I call it that, where they'll have every town department come in to go over their budget for FY 2017. And that'll be the initial budget numbers from each department. Now, we're a little bit different because we do our own budget, and obviously we communicate very closely with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, and we've gone to the Budget Summit every year and presented them information. We don't necessarily, not even necessarily, we don't present it in the same level of detail that the departments do, because we're not on the same time frame as those departments that report directly and are under the purview of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. But what we will do, and we have done in past years, is given them a sort of an initial budget analysis showing where we think the increases are going to be. And then subsequent to that, we will put those numbers into the cost center format that we use, but then there's also a spreadsheet that Bonnie Holstein uses that Steve will go ahead and break out even further, and will show not only the appropriated budget information, but also our revolving funds and our spending on, things that aren't necessarily covered directly by the appropriation. So in anticipation of being there on Saturday, I want to, or the Budget Subcommittee wanted to present this information to us as a whole, so that we can have talked about it first, and then we will go ahead and talk to them about it on Saturday. So you can see here on this slide, titled the Initial Budget Analysis, there's several things listed, and these are where we think we're going to see increases this year. The first and biggest is salary increases to retain our current staffing level. Those are steps and lanes for our teachers at $538,000. We're projecting a SPED consulting for our OTs, PTs, and ABAs for about $75,000. SPED out-of-district placement of an increase of around $250,000. Case transportation, roughly an increase of $25,000. Then we're looking to do some things. We feel like we need to think about additional staff at Russell Street School for $60,000. Additional staff at maybe the other buildings for another $60,000. Materials and resources, we're looking for an increase of $100,000. Cost of living adjustment for our non-contractual staff, primarily our custodial staff, for around $20,000. And then something Steve alluded to, the increase in substitutes, $100,000, and professional development, $20,000, for a total increase of $1.2 million over the appropriation from last year. Now what I'm going to do here is just kind of go line by line and with a little bit more background. Salary increases for current staffing level includes the steps and lanes. Right now, we haven't done any analysis on any potential adjustments for staff replacement due to retirements or other staff leaving the district. Although at the moment, typically by this time, or not typically, but quite often, by this time of the year, we may have heard of 1, 2, or 3 staff that are thinking about retiring and maybe have even put their papers in. Right now, we don't have any information in that regard. Not to say it won't happen, but right now we don't have anything for that. SPED consulting, an increase of $75,000, primarily due to our concerted and continuing effort to provide services in district, rather than go out and get contractors or out-of-district placements to do it. It's less expensive when we do it, even though our costs are increasing when we do this by $75,000. If we didn't do it this way, it would be going up by more. It wouldn't necessarily be in the same cost center, but it would go up. And we also think that, and we know that it has a positive impact on the student and minimizes the impact on their day-to-day school experience if they can receive these services in district and in the building. Okay, the SPED out of district, currently an estimate of $250,000 increase that we're still working towards finalizing. We typically expect, and the trend is to see our out of district costs go up year by year. So we do expect it to go up. We don't necessarily think it'll go up exactly $250,000. We'll work that out as we go, but that's in there right now. Additional staff at Russell Street, based on our enrollment and staffing right now, we feel we need to add at least one staff member at Russell Street in particular to keep the class size at a manageable level. We feel if we don't, based on our analysis, add that staff, we're going to get up into that 27, 28, which I think we can all agree we're not comfortable with. We prefer to keep it down in the lower to mid-20s, but in order to do that next year with the fairly large second grade class moving up to third grade, plus the students already in there, and the fact that we've reduced staff in past years, this would be an opportunity to get to address that concern. Same thing with staff in the other buildings. Similar to Russell Street, we're concerned about class size at both Shaker Lane and the high school, and we've put this as a separate line item. Just we don't know exactly which school yet. We're still focusing on that and trying to figure it out. But again, it would be to alleviate the class size issues. Materials and resources at $100,000, looking for curriculum materials for science and English language arts at the middle school, as well as social studies at the elementary school. And obviously, while beneficial to the students in general, we need to do this on a regular basis to keep our current materials, our curriculum materials current with evolving and emerging standards. And you've heard talk at the middle school, they piloted some science programs. They picked the one they want to use, and now we need to go ahead and get the materials to do that. And it's the same thing with ELA and social studies. The COLA for the non-contractual staff around $20,000. Primarily custodial. We talked about this when we talked about in the cafeteria too. We talked about this when we did the cost center presentation. We're below the market rates. Other districts are and not just other school districts, but other similar jobs and other maybe not in the education market, but we are paying more. And we feel like if we're going to have in-house staff, we need to take care of them and pay them. And also, we want that continuity service. We train them, they become a vested part of the district, and if we keep turning them over because we can't compete in the marketplace, that's going to have a negative impact on the district. Lastly, we have an increase in substitutes of $100,000 for that line item, and professional development on $20,000. We've seen an increase over the past several years in these line items. We budget a certain amount, but we spend more. And what we've been able to do in past years is use our revolving funds to meet those shortfalls. But now that our revolving funds we're becoming more reliant on those in handling our operating budget, we feel like we need to increase these line items to more accurately reflect the amount we actually spend so that we can sustain the operating budget. So that's why we're going to do that. This is money we are already spending. This isn't new spending. It's just a way we account for it and make sure that it's reflective of what we need from the appropriation. So that's what we're going to go in with on Saturday. It is initial. It will change. We'll see what the feedback is from the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen relative to what they think they're going to be able to do to increase the appropriation. And then, we'll go through the process as we always do, year by year, to, close whatever gap there is relative to what we're looking for versus what they think they can do. And we'll have those discussions, and we'll go from there. Any questions or comments prior to Saturday?
Just real quick, on that last slide about the substitution of professional development, correct me if I'm wrong, as you said, this is money we've already spent, we're just accounting for it differently. I think it's also good to note that that means we're getting it from a different source, whereas before we were able to draw from our revolving funds to pay for this. We can't anymore because we tapped a lot of that for how we filled that gap last year. So this is an example of that lack of flexibility that we have. based on decisions we made
For sure.
as a town last year.
So just to expand on that, I would word this one a little differently, because it's not an increase in $100,000 for substitutes, it's an increase in this line item, right?
Yeah.
It makes it sound like we're spending a lot more, where we're
That's a
really
good
not.
point.
We're
No,
just
you're right.
accounting for it
Yep,
differently.
semantically, you're absolutely correct. That does what it
Now,
sounds like. and we can
It
fix
bothered
that.
me when I thought the cost of subs were
Right.
going up that much.
Right.
Right, but it's really not.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
It's the difference between an allocation versus an
Right.
expenditure.
No, That's a good point. I'll clean that up prior to that. Good point. Prior to taking it out on Saturday. All right.
And I think hitting that message is helpful because we made some decisions. We were all in a tough spot last year, and that's what we
Right,
said.
and to be honest, it's not even simply just last year. I mean, this has been an ongoing theme as we've gone through the budget, is that the more reliant we become, the less flexibility we have. We've hit that over and over and over again. This is probably the most concrete example of what we're talking about. So this will be the first time where we actually see it eye to eye, face to face. Hey, this is where we are. You know, we've made a conscious determination to be here, and it was the right decision to make, and it was supported, you know, by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. You know, maybe a member two here of either of those boards might have grudgingly supported it, but in general, it was supported. We didn't do it cavalierly, and we didn't do it unilaterally either. You know, this was definitely a discussion, you know, long discussions that we had about how we wanted to do that. So, yeah, we'll keep reiterating that, and we'll see what they come away with that.
Yeah, so you caught that one there. I think on two other points here, the SPED consultant one there, which is then followed by the next one, which is the out-of-district pieces there, you know, I think making sure that they're probably going to push back, you know, how much is that 75K offsetting? Because the 250 isn't going to go to 325 if they don't approve that 720, right? They always seem to want that cost-benefit analysis.
Right.
Might be something we might need to be thinking about, being able to provide the backup for that later.
Right, right, the point being that it would go up more. It would go up by more than
I think us having
75,000. We should quantify
a feel for
it.
what that number
Yeah.
might be is, you know, so they understand that it's actually a cost savings,
Right.
even though it's a budget
Right.
increase.
And if we quantify it and they realize, oh, it's, you know, 50% or 33%, or even if it's 12%, it's still legitimate. So,
And
yeah, that's a good
it's a
idea.
mandatory thing.
Right.
There's no discretion in us funding
Correct.
these services.
Right.
Which again,
The students are going to receive the services, no question.
because I think we had a good discussion with the selectmen on, you know, looking at the fact that we have required services we have to provide. We can't provide a level staff budget.
Right.
Because the services we have to provide vary.
Right. And that terminology has already been debated by the selectmen. I know that Paul Avella was, you know, we need to think about a different way to portray that because it's not directly relevant to every department, not strictly the schools, but primarily. And they're already talking about that, so that mindset is there, and we can keep pushing on that.
And then one other thing, would it bring up for discussion, the $100,000 for the curriculum materials? Should we be thinking of, again, not to just move buckets around, but is that something we should be planning as an ongoing capital type expense every year? You know, that we have a solid placeholder for curriculum materials in either our operating budget or the capital budget. Again, I'm just thinking of this magic spreadsheet that's got 5 years of curriculum materials every year, so that we're not gapping.
Yeah, that's a great question, because several years ago, we would have been talking explicitly, almost explicitly, about textbooks.
Right.
And some supporting materials for the teachers, but textbooks. And we were told at the time, because we tried it, that we can't, that by Mass General statute, you can't do textbooks as capital. I think that's interesting because they become obsolete and they depreciate, which is, to me, the definition of capital, but I took a couple accounting classes, so that's what I know. So, but now we're not necessarily talking about textbooks. And as a matter of fact, I think that the science curriculum materials is very much online, ebook type of thing. So is it worth having that discussion again and thinking about, is there a better way to do it?
Because these are, you know, because it's not really part of our operating budget, these curriculum materials that we need to purchase. And maybe it doesn't meet the correct definition of capital, but it's going to be a new item that shows up
Well, let's remember.
year over year that we have to purchase.
let's remember, they put it into capital last year.
Yeah, they did. We did. We made.
That's what I mean.
We closed the gap by virtue, partly closed, the way we closed the gap last year was right, to pull some things out and do it as a capital. So, we can think about that.
Yeah, I think there was a, I'm not going to call it a misinterpretation of the law, but you can use capital to purchase resources such as textbooks, but you can't take out loans to do that.
Okay.
So I think maybe there was confusion. I mean, I wasn't here, so
Inside the
sometimes that language is hard to interpret.
If it's available, leftover excess
I mean,
funds.
it's a great point, and I think that it's definitely something we should bring up, and as we, again, this is initial.
Yeah.
It's where we start.
Yeah.
How we fund it and get there or not get there, as the case may be, relative to maybe we don't get all the way to 1.2, or we get to, part of that inside the appropriation and part of it on the capital, and we'll have to see.
Yeah, part of it is to set up the discussion so that as we build out the multi-year plans, where are we going to put this line item?
And the other thing that I would reiterate, or that I would mention, that I haven't mentioned yet, is we have not done as a budget subcommittee yet, is think about or project out revolving funds, circuit breaker, and school choice primarily relative to what we could do to this 1.2. We want to see what the selectmen are coming back with in the finance committee with what they think they can afford relative to the appropriation they have to do for the other departments. And once we have that, then we'll start to factor that in, and that'll be a part of it, along with capital as a solution, and also use of revolving funds and where we are with that. So, just how we always do it. All right.
I agree with the whole discussion on the materials, because it bothers me that you fund revolving expenses out of a capital budget and not out of your operating budget, because by definition, they seem like they should be, and not the one-time override. So, but the way it's worded, it almost appears as if we want it as a capital override. My other question is on the, I know it's fairly short money, on the increase for the non-contractual staff. Have we looked at what the personnel bylaw numbers are, and can we justify it by bringing the staff to or match whatever the town staff are paid?
That's a good question. We've never done that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is a good question. We'll take a look at that, because it might be that we kind of already do, even if we did it by accident, because I don't think we're...
Go way under.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that.
We'll take a look at it.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. That's a good point. We can do that. We can do that in concert with the town side, because that's there. Good.
If I may, part of what's driving that non-contractual staff increase is January 1st there's a mandatory bylaw increase in minimum wage in the state. So we have some people that are barely making minimum wage now, so we have to bump that up. So, yeah, that's a big piece of it.
But we should follow whatever the town guidelines are as best.
Or
At the minimum, we should
know
follow.
why we're not, and know where we're not. And it should be a conscious analysis, and then, we'll see what happens. But you're right, it's a good point. All right, anything else? All right, I'll be there on Saturday. It's typically a fairly painless operation, because it is preliminary, both from their point of view and ours. And we do meet again next week, so I'll let you know how it goes. Okay?
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Interested citizens? None. All right. Subcommittee reports. PMBC?
PMBC has been fairly busy. I think the school roof project, high school roof, is underway.
School roof project is
now?
done.
Good.
They expanded the scope of the initial proposal that they received as they got into some of the wet insulation area. They had to expand the scope of that back, and they actually had to expand part of the sloped roof and take off some metal roofing and replace all that. It was well worth doing it, and I think that, I don't have the exact number, but I think it's pretty, there was $100,000 budgeted through PMBC, and I think they spent pretty close to $90,000 on that high school roof.
But that's good, actually.
But it's good,
Spend a little bit
and
less, they got a little bit
it
more.
rained, John, were there any leaks in that?
I didn't
Okay.
notice anything
Okay.
today.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if there is...
It's still raining, so Fernando was going on vacation, and he said to me, "Oh,
Yeah, I
well,
mean,
I moved the
obviously-
barrels." so-
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if there is weather, that was our test, the next rainstorm, so if there are, we'll have the roof will come back, but initial reports right now is that's done and cleaned up and finished.
Wasn't anything today.
Next time, instead of waiting for it to rain, just call Chief Wazinski,
Get the
he's gonna do
hose,
some
yeah.
training with the hose, and come up there
Yeah.
and shoot some right on the roof.
Yeah.
Let's see, the other project I think you also have ordered the new motors for the circulating system. Are those in yet, or are those?
No, they'll take some time. They're scheduled to do, this is the frequency drives at the high school that was in conjunction with the new hot water tanks that we installed this past summer. So those frequency drives will be installed, I believe they're scheduled for early January.
Okay.
They had to order them, and they like to get them in and test them a little bit just to make sure they're not going to fail. So that should be done in January.
Right, and then I think the Shaker Lane paving project's all done. I think they came back and finished the little bit of extra work they needed to do.
Yep.
So I think looks like a lot of the projects are well underway, and I think there's still a few more queued up that we got to just get some things straightened out on.
Yep, and then if I may, the life skills room at the high school is done, completed, and being used at this point in time. It wasn't a PMBC thing, I just thought I'd throw that out there, so.
All right, good. Budget Subcommittee, I think we've heard enough from those guys.
Let's hear it again.
No, we can't talk anymore. Policy.
We have leftover candy. Trick or treat.
We can have our costumes on.
Wellness Committee's not here.
I was
so-
going to say, that's not a good line.
It looks like it's apples. So tonight we have the second reading of the first batch of policies. You have to wait. He's going through the bag.
Picking
here.
all the good stuff.
On it. From the last meeting, we had a couple of just minor edits on two policies, AC and ACAB. One of the sentences, there was just a missing gender identity, not repeated in a couple of the sentences, so I just corrected those. So this batch is ready for a second reading. And then next week, because the train keeps moving, I already met with Kelly on the next batch of 20 that are going to be cycled through for first reading next week. I'll get those in for the packet for tomorrow night. And then over Christmas break, I got about 10 or so that I'm going to catch up that require more substantial work at this point. But I think we'll get those ready to queue those up for the January meetings. On it. So,
I had a question on the ADA policy on the background check sometimes.
yeah.
Should we explicitly mention coaches? They're not actually called out. They're kind of in that gray area of what a school employee is, right? Since they're
School employees.
They're not.
they are, but they just seem like they're a different class of employee, right?
No.
From,
We hire them as
we should
employees.
call them out. We call out the other people we contract with, like the transportation, so I didn't know if the coaches should.
Yeah, but they're not contract. Transportation is contract.
I understand.
The coaches are paid the same way a teacher's paid, right out of payroll and...
Yes, I understand that. I just wondered if it would be helpful to call them out more explicitly.
I understand, except I can't see the distinction. They're paid the same way, they're oriented the same way, they're hired the same way. I mean, the only difference is that they work after a normal school hour and they don't teach in a classroom, they're out on a field or a hockey rink or
Okay.
but they are our employees, they're not independent contractors.
I think that the law also includes them into the policy, should.
Right.
Yeah,
They submit time slips, we have to track their hours.
Okay.
And they're under, that's the other thing, they're under the LEA collective bargaining agreement. And they're covered under that. They are employees. All right, anything else on that?
I just want to point out how much work Daryl is doing
Always.
and is about to do. He's got, we're looking to get excited.
I heard he's got a permanent seat with the PMBC. They love him so much. All right, we have two motions here.
All right, I make a motion that we accept for a second reading the following reviewed policies: AA, AB, ACA, ACE, ADDA, CA, CAA, CBD, CBI, CE, CH, CH, CA, CL, CA, CBF, FCB, LA, LD, and LDA. Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion on the policies for review? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right.
I make a motion that we accept for a second reading the following modified policies: AC, ACAB, AFC.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion on the modified policies? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right.
See, and I make it easier for you by actually writing the whole thing
I
out,
know.
put it into the packet. You don't even
Right.
have to look at the list now
Yeah,
to
can you imagine?
generate them.
Can you imagine if I had to go through and, oh, I missed one?
So I see we have this new one, AD, which we're not dealing with tonight.
Yeah, I circulated that one for comments. That will be one I'll try to, would like to try to finalize over Christmas.
Okay.
There, so if anybody's got
So
any
it's not going to be
inputs-
next meeting either?
No.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and then the one we circulated for wellness is going to probably take a few meetings before that
Okay.
comes back.
Okay.
There, so.
All right, good. All right, we're good on that?
Yep.
All right, is there any other business we have not considered that we would like to? All right, do we need an executive session tonight?
No, we don't.
All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you, LCTV. We're back next week. Don't get a break this time, we're right back on next Thursday. So we'll see you guys then, thank you.